Chapter 24. Given history's penchant for repeating itself, at least around me, you won't be surprised to find out that Mike Koslaw's plan for paying Sadie's bills was a return engagement of the Jody Jamboree. He said he thought he could get the original participants to reprise their roles as long as we scheduled it for midsummer, and he was as good as his word. Almost all of them came on board. Ellie even agreed to encore her sturdy performances of Camptown Races and Clinch Mountain Breakdown on the banjo, although she claimed her fingers were still sore from the previous go-round. We picked the 12th and 13th of July, but for a while, the issue was in some doubt. The first obstacle to be surmounted was Sadie herself, who was horrified at the idea. She called it taking charity. "That sounds like something you might have learned at your mother's knee," I said. She glared at me for a moment, then looked down and began stroking her hair against the bad side of her face. "What if it was? Does that make it wrong?" "Geez, let me think. You're talking about a life lesson from the woman whose biggest concern after finding out her daughter had been mutilated and almost killed was her church affiliation?" "It's demeaning," she said in a low voice. "Throwing yourself on the mercy of the town is demeaning." "You didn't feel that way when it was Bobby Jill." "You're hounding me, Jake. Please don't do that." I sat down beside her and took her hand. She pulled it away. I took it again. This time she let me hold it. "I know this isn't easy for you, honey, but there's a time to take as well as a time to give. I don't know if that one's in the book of Ecclesiastes, but it's true, just the same. Your health insurance is a joke. Dr. Ellerton's giving us a break on his fee. I never asked—" "Hush, Sadie, please. It's called pro bono work, and he wants to do it, but there are other surgeons involved here. The bills for your surgeries are going to be enormous, and my resources will only stretch so far." "I almost wish he'd killed me," she whispered. "Don't you ever say that." She shrank from the anger in my voice, and the tears started. She could only cry from one eye now. "Hon, people want to do this for you. Let them. I know your mother lives in your head. Almost everyone's mother does, I guess, but you can't let her have her way on this one. Those doctors can't fix it anyway. It'll never be the way it was. Ellerton told me so. They can fix a lot of it," which sounded marginally better than they can fix some of it. She sighed. "You're braver than I am, Jake. You're plenty brave. Will you do this?" "Oh, the Sadie Dunhill charity show. My mother would shit a brick if she found out." "All the more reason, I'd say. We'll send her some stills." That made her smile, but only for a moment. She lit a cigarette with fingers that trembled slightly, then began to smooth the hair against the side of her face again. "Would I have to be there? Let them see what their dollars are buying, sort of like an American Berkshire pig on the auction block?" "Of course not. Although I doubt if anyone would faint. Most folks around here have seen worse. As members of the faculty in a farming and ranching area, we had seen worse ourselves. Britta Carlson, for instance, who had been badly burned in a house fire. Or Duffy Hendrickson, who had a left hand that looked like a hoof after a chain fall holding a truck motor slipped in his father's garage. I'm not ready for that kind of inspection. I don't think I ever will be. I hoped with all my heart that didn't turn out to be true. The crazy people of the world, the Johnny Claytons, the Lee Harvey Oswalds, shouldn't get to win. If God won't make it better after they do have their shitty little victories, then ordinary people have to. They have to try at least. But this wasn't the time to sermonize on the subject. "Would it help if I said Dr. Ellerton himself has agreed to take part in the show?" She momentarily forgot about her hair and stared at me. "What?" "He wants to be the back end of Bertha." Bertha the Dancing Pony was a canvas creation of the kids in the art department. She wandered around during several of the skits, but her big number was a tail-waggling jig to Gene Autry's Back in the Saddle Again. The tail was controlled with a string pulled by the rear half of Team Bertha. Country folk, not generally noted for their sophisticated senses of humor, found her hilarious. Sadie began to laugh. I could see it hurt her, but she couldn't help it. She fell back against the couch, one palm pressed to the center of her forehead as if to keep her brains from exploding. "All right," she said when she could finally talk again. "I'll let you do it just to see that." Then she glared at me. "But I'll see it during the dress rehearsal. You're not getting me up on stage where everybody can stare at me and whisper, 'Oh, look at that poor girl.' Have we got that straight?" "We absolutely do," I said, and kissed her. That was one hurdle. The next would be convincing Dallas's premier plastic surgeon to come to Jody in the July heat and prance around beneath the back half of a 30-pound canvas costume because I hadn't actually asked him. That turned out to be no problem. Ellerton lit up like a kid when I put the idea to him. "I even have practical experience," he said. "My wife's been telling me that I'm a perfect horse's ass for years now." The last hurdle turned out to be the venue. In mid-June, right around the time Lee was getting kicked off a dock in New Orleans for trying to hand out his pro-Castro leaflets to the sailors of the USS Wasp, Deke came by Sadie's house. He kissed her on her good cheek. She averted the bad side of her face when anyone came to visit and asked me if I'd like to step out for a cold beer. "Go on," Sadie said. "I'll be fine." Deke drove us to a dubiously air-conditioned tin roof called the Prairie Chicken, 9 miles west of town. It was mid-afternoon, the place empty except for 2 solitary drinkers at the bar. The jukebox, dark. Deke handed me $1. "I'll buy, you fetch. How's that for a deal?" I went to the bar and collared 2 buckhorns. "If I'd known you were going to bring back Buc-ee's, I would have gone myself," Deke said. "Man, this stuff is horse piss." "I happen to like it," I said. "Anyway, I thought you did your drinking at home. The asshole quotient in the local bars is a little too high for my taste, I believe you said." "I don't want a damn beer anyway." Now that we were away from Sadie, I could see that he was steaming mad. "What I want to do is punch Fred Miller in the face and kick Jessica Caltrop's narrow and no doubt lace-trimmed ass." I knew the names and faces, although having been just a humble wage slave, I'd never actually conversed with either of them. Miller and Caltrop were 2/3 of the Denholm County School Board. "Don't stop there," I said. "As long as you're in a bloodthirsty mood, tell me what you want to do to Dwight Rawson. Isn't he the other one?" "It's Rawlins," Deke said moodily, "and I'll give him a pass. He voted on our side." "I don't know what you're talking about." "They won't let us use the school gym for the jamboree, even though it's the middle of summer we're talking about, and it's just standing there vacant." "Are you kidding?" Sadie had told me that certain elements of the town might take against her, and I hadn't believed her. Silly old Jake Epping still clinging to his science fiction fantasies of the 21st century. "Son, I only wish I were." They cited fire insurance concerns. I pointed out that they didn't have any insurance concerns when it was a benefit for a student who'd been in an accident. And the Caltrop woman, dried-up old kitty that she is, said, "Oh, yes, Deke, but that was during the school year." They've got concerns, all right. Mostly about how a member of the faculty got her face cut open by the crazy man she was married to. They're afraid it'll get mentioned in the paper or, God forbid, on one of the Dallas TV stations. "How can it matter?" I asked. Christ, Deke, he wasn't even from here. He was from Georgia." "That doesn't matter to them. What matters to them is that he died here, and they're afraid it'll reflect badly on the school, on the town, and on them." I heard myself bleating, not a noble sound coming from a man in the prime of life, but I couldn't help it. "That makes no sense at all." "They'd fire if they could, just to get rid of the embarrassment. Since they can't, They're hoping she'll quit before the kids have to look at what Clayton did to her face. Goddamn small-town bullshit hypocrisy at its best, my boy. When he was in his 20s, Fred Miller used to rip and roar in the Nuevo Laredo whorehouses twice a month. More, if he could get an advance on his allowance from his daddy. And I have it on damn good authority that when Jessica Caltrip was playing Jessie Trapp from Sweetwater Ranch, she got real fat when she was 16 and real thin again about 9 months later. I've a mind to tell them that my memory's even longer than their blue goddamn noses, and I could embarrass them plenty if I wanted to. I wouldn't even have to work at it that hard. They can't really blame Sadie for her ex-husband's craziness, can they? Grow up, George. Sometimes you act like you were born in a barn, or some country where folks actually think straight. To them, it's about sex. To folks like Fred and Jessica, it's always about sex. They probably think Alfalfa and Spanky on the Little Rascals spend their spare time diddling Darla out behind the barn while Buckwheat cheers 'em on. And when something like this happens, it's the woman's fault. They wouldn't come right out and say so, but in their hearts they believe men are beasts and women who can't gentle 'em. Well, be it on their own heads, son. Be it on their own heads. I won't let 'em get away with this. You'll have to, I said. If you don't, the ruckus might get back to Sadie, and she's fragile now. This might tip her over completely. Yeah, he said. He rummaged his pipe out of his breast pocket. Yeah, I know that. I'm just blowing off steam. Ellie talked to the folks who run the Grange Hall just yesterday. They're happy to let us put on the show there, and it seats 50 more people, because of the balcony, you know. Well, there, I said, relieved. Cooler heads prevail. Only one problem. They're asking $400 for both nights. If I come up with $200, can you come up with the other two? You won't be getting it back from the receipts, you know. That's all earmarked for Sadie's medical work. I knew very well about the cost of Sadie's medical work. I'd already paid $300 to cover the part of her hospital stay that her shitpoke insurance wouldn't stand good for. In spite of Ellerton's good offices, the other expenses would mount up rapidly. As for me, I wasn't scraping the financial bottom quite yet, but I could see it. George, what do you say? 50-50, I agreed. Then drink up your shitty beer. I want to get back to town. On our way out of that sad excuse for a drinking establishment, a poster propped in the window caught my eye. At the top, see the fight of the century on closed-circuit TV, live from Madison Square Garden. Dallas's own Tom the Hammer Case versus Dick Tiger. Dallas Auditorium, Thursday, August 29th. Advance tickets available here. Below were side-by-side photos of two bare-chested beefcakes with their gloved fists held up in the accepted fashion. One was young and unmarked. The other guy looked a lot older, and as if he'd had his nose broken a few times. The names were what had stopped me, though. I knew them from somewhere. Don't even think about it, Deke said, shaking his head. You'd get more sport out of watching a dogfight between a pit bull and a cocker spaniel. An old cocker spaniel. Really. Tommy Case always had a ton of heart, but now it's a 40-year-old heart in a 40-year-old body. He got him a beer gut, and he can hardly move at all. Tiger's young and fast. He'll be a champ in a couple of years if the matchmakers don't slip up. In the meantime, they feed him walking tank jobs like Case to keep him in trim. It sounded to me like Rocky Balboa against Apollo Creed, but why not? Sometimes life imitates art. Deke said, TV you pay to watch in an auditorium. Boy, howdy, what next? The wave of the future, I guess, I said. And it'll probably sell out, in Dallas at least, but that doesn't change the fact that Tom Case is the wave of the past. Tiger'll slice him like cold cuts. Sure you're okay with this Grange thing, George? Absolutely. That was a strange June. On one hand, I was delighted to be rehearsing with the troupe that had put on the original jamboree. It was déjà vu of the best kind. On the other hand, I found myself wondering with greater and greater frequency if I had ever intended to strike Lee Harvey Oswald from history's equation in the first place. I couldn't believe I lacked the guts to do it. I'd already killed one bad man, and in cold blood, but it was an undeniable fact that I'd had Oswald in my sights and let him go. I told myself it was the uncertainty principle and not the fact of his family, but I kept seeing Marina smiling and holding her hands out in front of her belly. I kept wondering if he might not be a patsy after all. I reminded myself he'd be back in October, and then, of course, I asked myself how that would change things. His wife would still be pregnant, and the window of uncertainty would still be open. Meanwhile, there was Sadie's slow recovery to preside over. There were bills to pay. There were insurance forms to fill out, the bureaucracy every bit as infuriating in 1963 as in 2011, and those rehearsals. Dr. Ellerton could only show up for one of them, but he was a quick study and hoofed his half of Birth of the Dancing Pony with charming brio. After the run-through, he told me he wanted to bring another surgeon on board, a facial specialist from Mass General. I told him, with a sinking heart, that another surgeon sounded like a grand idea. "Can you afford it?" he asked. "Mark Anderson ain't cheap." "We'll manage," I said. I invited Sadie to rehearsals when the show dates grew close. She refused, gently but firmly, in spite of her earlier promise to come to at least one dress rehearsal. She rarely left the house, and when she did, it was only to go into the backyard garden. She hadn't been to the school or in town since the night John Clayton cut her face and then his own throat. I spent the late morning and early afternoon of July 12th at the Grange Hall running a final tech rehearsal. Mike Koslaw, who had settled as naturally into the role of producer as he had that of slapstick comedian, told me the Saturday night show was a sellout, and tonight's was at 90%. "We'll get enough walk-ups to fill the place, Mr. A. Count on it. I just hope me and Bobby Jill don't mess up the encore." Bobby, Jill, and I, Mike. And you won't mess up. All of that was good. Less good was passing Ellen Docherty's car turning out of Bee-Tree Lane just as I was turning in, and then finding Sadie sitting by the living room window with tears on her unmarked cheek and a handkerchief in one fisted hand. "What?" I demanded. "What did she say to you?" Sadie surprised me by mustering a grin. It was lopsided, but not without a certain gamine charm. "Nothing that wasn't the truth. Please don't worry. I'll make you a sandwich, and you can tell me how it went." So that was what I did. And I did worry, of course, but I kept my worries to myself. Also my comments on the subject of meddlesome high school principals. That evening at 6, Sadie inspected me, re-knotted my tie, and then brushed some lint, real or imagined, from the shoulders of my sport coat. "I'd tell you to break a leg, but you might just go and do it." She was wearing her old jeans and a smock top that camouflaged, a little anyway, her weight loss. I found myself remembering the pretty dress she'd worn to the original Jody Jamboree. Pretty dress that night, with a pretty girl inside it. That was then. Tonight, the girl, still pretty on one side, would be at home when the curtain went up, watching a Route 66 rerun. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Wishing you were going to be there, that's all." I was sorry as soon as it was out, but it was almost okay. Her smile faded, then came back, the way the sun does when it passes behind a cloud that's only small. "You'll be there, which means I will be." She looked at me with grave timidity from the one eye her Veronica Lake flip left visible. "If you love me, that is." "I love you plenty." "Yes, I guess you do." She kissed the corner of my mouth. "And I love you. So don't break any legs. and give everybody my thanks." "I will. You're not afraid to stay here alone?" "I'll be okay." It wasn't actually an answer to my question, but it was the best she could do for the time being. Mike was right about the walk-ups. We sold out the Friday night performance a full hour in advance of showtime. Donald Bellingham, our stage manager, lowered the house lights at 8 p.m. on the dot. I expected to feel a letdown after the nearly sublime original with its pie-throwing finale, which we intended to repeat on Saturday night only, the consensus being that we wanted to clean up the Grange Hall stage and the first couple of rows just a single time. But this one was nearly as good. For me, the comedy highlight was that goddamn dancing horse. At one point, Dr. Ellerton's front-half cohort, a wildly over-enthusiastic Coach Borman, almost boogied Bertha right off the stage. The audience believed those 20 or 30 seconds of weaving around the footlights was part of the show and heartily applauded the daring do. I, who knew better, found myself caught in an emotional paradox that will probably never be repeated. I stood in the wings next to a nearly paralytic Donald Bellingham, laughing wildly while my terrified heart fluttered at the very top of my throat. The night's harmonic came during the encore. Mike and Bobby Jill walked to center stage hand in hand. Bobby Jill faced the audience and said, "Miss Dunhill means an awful lot to me because of her kindness and her Christian charity. She helped me when I needed help, and she made me want to learn how to do what we're going to do for you now. We thank you all for coming out tonight and showing your Christian charity. Don't we, Mike?" "Yep," he said. "You guys are the best." He looked stage left. I pointed to Donald, who was bent over his record player with the tone arm raised, ready to stick the groove. This time Donald's father was going to know damn well that Donald had borrowed one of his big band records, because the man was in the audience. Glenn Miller, that long-gone bombardier, launched into In the Mood. And on stage, to rhythmic clapping from the audience, Mike Coslaw and Bobby Jill Allnut flew into a jet-propelled Lindy far more fervent than any I had ever managed with either Sadie or Christy. It was all youth and joy and enthusiasm, and that made it gorgeous. When I saw Mike squeeze Bobby Jill's hand, telling her by touch to counterspin and shoot through his legs, I was suddenly back in Derry watching Bevy from the Levee and Richie from the Ditchy. It's all of a piece, I thought. It's an echo so close to perfect you can't tell which one is the living voice and which is the ghost voice returning. For a moment, everything was clear, and when that happens, you see that the world is barely there at all. Don't we all secretly know this? It's a perfectly balanced mechanism of shouts and echoes, pretending to be wheels and cogs, a dream clock chiming beneath a mystery glass we call life. Behind it, below it, and around it, chaos, storms, men with hammers, men with knives, men with guns, women who twist what they cannot dominate and belittle what they cannot understand, a universe of horror and loss surrounding a single lighted stage where mortals dance in defiance of the dark. Mike and Bobby Jill danced in their time, and their time was 1963. That era of crew cuts, console televisions, and homemade garage rock. They danced on a day when President Kennedy promised to sign a nuclear test ban treaty and told reporters he had no intention of allowing our military forces to be mired in the arcane politics and ancient grudges of Southeast Asia. They danced, as Bevy and Richie had danced, as Sadie and I had danced, and they were beautiful. And I loved them, not in spite of their fragility, but because of it. I love them still. They ended perfectly, hands upraised, breathing hard and facing the audience, which rose to its feet. Mike gave them a full 40 seconds to pound their hands together. It's amazing how fast the footlights can transform a humble left tackle into fully fledged pressed ham, and then called for quiet. Eventually he got it. Our director, Mr. George Amberson, wants to say a few words. He put a lot of effort and creativity into this show, so I hope you'll give him a big hand. I walked out to fresh applause. I shook Mike's hand and gave Bobby Jill a peck on the cheek. They scampered off stage. I raised my hands for quiet and launched into my carefully rehearsed speech, telling them Sadie couldn't be here tonight, but thanking them all on her behalf. Every public speaker worth his salt knows to concentrate on specific members of the audience, and I focused on a pair in the third row who looked remarkably like Ma and Pa in American Gothic. This was Fred Miller and Jessica Caltrop, the school board members who denied us use of the school gym on the grounds that Sadie being assaulted by her ex was in bad taste and should be ignored insofar as possible. 4 sentences in, I was interrupted by gasps of surprise. This was followed by applause, isolated at first but quickly growing to a storm. The audience took to its feet again. I had no idea what they were applauding for until I felt a light, tentative hand grip my arm above the elbow. I turned to see Sadie, standing beside me in her red dress. She'd put her hair up and secured it with a glittery clip. Her face, both sides of it, was completely visible. I was shocked to discover that once fully revealed, the residual damage wasn't as awful as I had feared. There might be some sort of universal truth there, but I was too stunned to suss it out. Sure, that deep, ragged hollow and the fading hash marks of the stitches were hard to look at. So was the slack flesh and her unnaturally wide left eye, which no longer quite blinked in tandem with the right one, but she was smiling, that charming one-sided smile, and in my eyes, that made her Helen of Troy. I hugged her and she hugged me back, laughing and crying. Beneath the dress, her whole body was thrumming like a high-tension wire. When we faced the audience again, everyone was up and cheering, except for Miller and Caltrop, who looked around, saw they were the only ones still on their fannies, and reluctantly joined the others. "Thank you," Sadie said when they quieted. "Thank you all, from the very bottom of my heart. Special thanks to Ellen Dougherty, who told me that if I didn't come here and look you all in the eye, I'd regret it for the rest of my life. And most thanks of all to—" The minutest of hesitations, I'm sure the audience didn't notice it, which made me the only one who knew how close Sadie had come to telling 500 people my actual name. "To George Amberson. I love you, George." Which brought down the house, of course. In dark times, when even the sages are uncertain, declarations of love always do. Ellen took Sadie, who was exhausted, home at 10:30. Mike and I turned out the Grange Hall lights at midnight and stepped into the alley. "Gonna come to the after-party, Mr. A? Al said he'd keep the diner open until 2, and he brought in a couple of kegs. He's not licensed for it, but I don't think anyone will arrest him." "Not me," I said. "I'm beat. I'll see you tomorrow night, Mike." I drove to Deke's before going home. He was sitting on his front porch in his pajamas, smoking a final pipe. "Pretty special night," he said. "Yes. That young woman showed guts, a country mile of 'em. She did. Are you going to do right by her, son?" "I'm going to try." He nodded. "She deserves that after the last one. And you're doing okay so far." He glanced toward my Chevy. "You could probably take your car tonight and park right out front. After tonight, I don't think anyone in town would bat an eye." He might have been right, but I decided better safe than sorry and hoofed it, just as I had on so many other nights. I needed the time to let my own emotions settle. I kept seeing her in the glow of the footlights, the red dress, the graceful curve of her neck, the smooth cheek, and the ragged one. When I got to Bee Tree Lane and let myself in, The hide-a-bed was in its hiding state. I stood looking at this, puzzled, not sure what to make of it. Then Sadie called my name, my real one, from the bedroom, very softly. The lamp was on, casting a soft light across her bare shoulders and one side of her face. Her eyes were luminous and grave. "I think this is where you belong," she said. "I want you to be here. Do you?" I took off my clothes and got in beside her. Her hand moved beneath the sheets, found me, and caressed me. "Are you hungry? Because I have pound cake if you are." "Oh, Sadie, I'm starving." "Then turn out the light." That night in Sadie's bed was the best of my life. Not because it closed the door on John Clayton, but because it opened the door on us again. When we finished making love, I fell into the first deep sleep I'd had in months. I awoke at 8 a.m. The sun was fully up. The angels were singing "My Boyfriend's Back" on the radio in the kitchen, and I could smell frying bacon. Soon she would call me to the table, but not yet, not just yet. I put my hands behind my head and looked at the ceiling, mildly stunned at how stupid, how almost willfully blind I'd been since the day I'd allowed Lee to get on the bus to New Orleans without doing anything to stop him. Did I need to know if George de Mohrenschildt had had more to do with the attempt on Edwin Walker than just goading an unstable little man into trying it? Well, there was actually quite a simple way to determine that, wasn't there? De Mohrenschildt knew, so I would ask him. Sadie ate better than she had since the night Clayton had invaded her home, and I did pretty well myself. Together, we polished off 6 eggs, plus toast and bacon. When the dishes were in the sink and she was smoking a cigarette with her second cup of coffee, I said I wanted to ask her something. If it's about coming to the show tonight, I don't think I could manage that twice. It's something else, but since you mention it, what exactly did Ellie say to you? That it was time to stop feeling sorry for myself and rejoin the parade. Pretty harsh. Sadie stroked her hair against the wounded side of her face, that automatic gesture. Miss Ellie's not known for delicacy and tact. Did she shock me, busting in here and telling me it was time to quit lollygagging? Yes, she did. Was she right? Yes, she was. She stopped stroking her hair and abruptly pushed it back with the heel of her hand. This is what I'm going to look like from now on, with some improvements. So I guess I better get used to it. Sadie's going to find out if that old saw about beauty only being skin deep is actually true. That's what I wanted to talk to you about. All right. She jetted smoke from her nostrils. Suppose I could take you to a place where the doctors could fix the damage to your face, not perfectly, but far better than Dr. Ellerton and his team ever could. Would you go? Even if you knew we could never come back here. She frowned. Are we speaking hypothetically? Actually, we're not. She crushed her cigarette out slowly and deliberately, thinking it over. Is this like Ms. Mimi going to Mexico for experimental cancer treatments? Because I don't think... I'm talking about America, hon. Well, if it's America, I don't understand why we couldn't... Here's the rest of it. I might have to go, with or without you. And never come back? She looked alarmed. Never. Neither one of us could, for reasons that are difficult to explain. I suppose you think I'm crazy. I know you're not. Her eyes were troubled, but she spoke without hesitation. I may have to do something that would look very bad to law enforcement types. It's not bad, but nobody would ever believe that. Jake, does this have anything to do with that thing you told me about Adlai Stevenson? What he said about hell freezing over? In a way, but here's the rub. Even if I'm able to do what I have to without being caught, and I think I can, that doesn't change your situation. Your face is still going to be scarred to some greater or lesser degree. In this place where I could take you, there are medical resources Ellerton can only dream of. But we could never come back." She wasn't speaking to me. She was trying to get it straight in her mind. "No. All else aside, if we came back to September 9th of 1958, the original version of Sadie Dunning would already exist. That was a mind-bender I didn't even want to consider." She got up and went to the window. She stood there with her back to me for a long time. I waited. "Jake?" "Yes, honey?" "Can you predict the future? You can, can't you?" I said nothing. In a small voice she said, "Did you come here from the future?" I said nothing. She turned from the window. Her face was very pale. "Jake, did you?" "Yes." It was as if a 70-pound rock had rolled off my chest. At the same time, I was terrified, for both of us, but mostly for her. How far?" "Honey, are you sure you—" "Yes. How far?" "Almost 48 years." "Am I dead?" "I don't know. I don't want to know. This is now, and this is us." She thought about that. The skin around the red marks of her injuries had turned very white, and I wanted to go to her, but I was afraid to move. What if she screamed and ran from me? "Why did you come?" "To stop a man from doing something. I'll kill him if I have to, if I can make absolutely sure he deserves killing, that is. So far, I haven't been able to do that." "What's the something?" "In 4 months, I'm pretty sure he's going to kill the president. He's going to kill John Kent." I saw her knees start to buckle, but she managed to stay on her feet just long enough to allow me to catch her before she fell. I carried her to the bedroom and went into the bathroom to wet a cloth in cold water. When I returned, her eyes were already open. She looked at me with an expression I could not decipher. "I shouldn't have told you." "Maybe not," she said. But she didn't flinch when I sat down next to her on the bed and made a little sighing noise of pleasure when I began to stroke her face with the cold cloth, detouring around the bad place where all sensation except for a deep, dull pain was now gone. When I was done, she looked at me solemnly. "Tell me one thing that's going to happen. I think if I'm going to believe you, you have to do that. Something like Adlai Stevenson and hell freezing over." "I can't. I majored in English, not American history. I studied Maine history in high school. It was a requirement, but I know next to nothing about Texas. I don't." But I realized I did know one thing. I knew the last thing in the betting section of Al Templeton's notebook because I double-checked. "In case you need a final cash transfusion," he'd written. "Jake, I know who's going to win a prize fight at Madison Square Garden next month. His name is Tom Case, and he's going to knock out Dick Tiger in the 5th round. If that doesn't happen, I guess you're free to call for the men in the white coats. But can you keep it just between us until then? A lot depends on it." "Yes, I can do that." I half expected Deke or Miss Ellie to buttonhole me after the second night's performance, looking grave and telling me they'd had a phone call from Sadie saying that I'd lost my ever-loving mind. But that didn't happen, and when I got back to Sadie's, there was a note on the table reading, "Wake me if you want a midnight snack." It wasn't midnight, not quite, and she wasn't asleep. The next 40 minutes or so were very pleasant. Afterward, in the dark, she said, "I don't have to decide anything right now, do I?" "No." "And we don't have to talk about this right now?" "No." "Maybe after the fight, the one you told me about?" "Maybe." "I believe you, Jake. I don't know if that makes me crazy or not, but I do. And I love you. I love you too." Her eyes gleamed in the dark, the one that was almond-shaped and beautiful. the one that drooped but still saw. I don't want anything to happen to you, and I don't want you to hurt anybody unless you absolutely have to. And never by mistake, never ever. Do you promise? Yes. That was easy. It was the reason Lee Oswald was still drawing breath. Will you be careful? Yes, I'll be very... She stopped my mouth with a kiss. Because no matter where you came from, there's no future for me without you. Now let's go to sleep. I thought the conversation would resume in the morning. I had no idea what, meaning how much, I would tell her when it did, but in the end I had to tell her nothing, because she didn't ask. Instead, she asked me how much the Sadie Dunhill charity show had brought in. When I told her just over $3,000, with the contents of the lobby donation box added to the gate, she threw back her head and let loose a beautiful, full-throated laugh. $3,000 wouldn't cover all her bills, but it was worth $1 million just to hear her laugh. And to not hear her say something like, why bother at all when I can just get it taken care of in the future? Because I wasn't entirely sure she really wanted to go, even if she did believe, and because I wasn't sure I wanted to take her. I wanted to be with her, yes, for as close to forever as people get. But it might be better in 63 and all the years God or Providence gave us after 63. We might be better. I could see her lost in 2011, eyeing every low-riding pair of pants and computer screen with awe and unease. I would never beat her or shout at her, no, not Sadie. But she might still become my Marina Persukova, living in a strange place and exiled from her homeland forever. There was one person in Jody who might know how I could put Al's final betting entry to use. That was Freddie Quinlan, the real estate agent. He ran a weekly nickel-in, quarter-to-stay poker game at his house, and I'd attended a few times. During several of these games, he bragged about his betting prowess in two fields, pro football and the Texas State basketball tournament. He saw me in his office only because he said it was too damn hot to play golf. What are we talking about here, George? Medium-sized bet or the house and lot? I'm thinking $500. He whistled, then leaned back in his chair and laced his hands over a tidy little belly. It was only 9 a.m, but the air conditioner was running full blast. Stacks of real estate brochures fluttered in its chilly exhaust. That's serious cabbage. Care to let me in on a good thing? Since he was doing me the favor, at least I hoped so, I told him. His eyebrows shot up so high they were in danger of meeting his receding hairline. Holy cow! Why don't you just chuck your money down a sewer? I've got a feeling, that's all. George, listen to your daddy. The Case Tiger fight isn't a sporting event. It's a trial balloon for this new closed-circuit TV thing. There might be a few good fights on the undercard, but the main bout's a joke. Tiger'll have instructions to carry the poor old fella for 7 or 8, then put him to sleep. Unless... He leaned forward. His chair made an unlovely skronk sound from somewhere underneath. Unless you know something. He leaned back again and pursed his lips. But how could you? You live in Jody, for Christ's sake. But if you did, you'd let a pal in on it, wouldn't you? I don't know anything, I said, lying straight to his face and happy to do so. It's just a feeling, but the last time I had one this strong, I bet on the Pirates to beat the Yankees in the World Series, and I made a bundle. Very nice, but you know the old saying, even a stopped clock gets it right twice a day. Can you help me or not, Freddie? He gave me a comforting smile that said the fool and his money would all too soon be parted. There's a guy in Dallas who'd be happy to take that kind of action. Name's Akiva Roth. Operates out of Faith Financial on Greenville Avenue. Took over the biz from his father 5 or 6 years ago. He lowered his voice. Word is, he's mobbed up. He lowered his voice still further. Carlos Barcelo. That was exactly what I was afraid of, because that had also been the word on Eduardo Gutierrez. I thought again of the Lincoln with the Florida plates parked across from Faith Financial. I'm not sure I'd want to be seen going into a place like that. I might want to teach again, and at least 2 members of the school board are already cheesed off at me. You could try Frank Fratty over in Fort Worth. He runs a pawn shop. Skronk, went the chair, as he leaned forward to get a better look at my face. What did I say, or did you inhale a bug? It's just that I knew a Fratty once, who also ran a pawn shop and took bets. Probably they both came from the same savings and loan clan in Romania. Anyway, he might fade 5 Cs, especially a sucker bet like you're talking about. But you won't get the odds you deserve. Of course, you wouldn't get 'em from Roth either, but you'd get better than you would from Frank Fratty. But with Frank, I wouldn't get the mob connection, right? I guess not, but who really knows? Bookies, even the part-time ones, ain't known for their high-class business associations. Probably I should take your advice and hold on to my money. Quinlan looked horrified. No, don't do that. Bet it on the Bears to win the NFC. That way you make a bundle. I practically guarantee it. On July 22nd, I told Sadie I had to run some errands in Dallas and said I'd ask Deke to check in on her. She said there was no need, that she'd be fine. She was regaining her old self, little by slowly, yes, but she was regaining it. She asked no questions about the nature of my errands. My initial stop was at First Corn, where I opened my safe deposit box and triple-checked Al's notes to make sure I really remembered what I thought I had. And yes, Tom Case was going to be the upset winner, knocking out Dick Tiger in the 5th. Al must have found the fight on the internet because he'd been gone from Dallas and the sensational 60s long before then. Can I help you with anything else today, Mr. Amberson? My banker asked as he escorted me to the door. Well, you could say a little prayer that my old buddy Al Templeton didn't swallow a bunch of internet bullshit. Maybe so. Do you know where I could find a costume shop? I'm supposed to be the magician at my nephew's birthday party. Mr. Link's secretary, after a quick glance through the yellow pages, directed me to an address on Young Street. There, I was able to buy what I needed. I stored it at the apartment on West Neely. As long as I was paying rent on the place, it ought to be good for something. I left my revolver, too, putting it on a high shelf in the closet. The bug, which I had removed from the upstairs lamp, went into the glove compartment of my car, along with the cunning little Japanese tape recorder. I would dispose of them somewhere in the scrubland on my return to Jody. They were of no more use to me. The apartment upstairs hadn't been re-rented, and the house was spookily silent. Before I left Neely Street, I walked around the fenced-in side yard, where just 3 months before Marina had taken photographs of Lee holding his rifle. There was nothing to see but beaten earth and a few hardy weeds. Then, as I turned to go, I did see something, a flash of red under the outside stairs. It was a baby's rattle. I took it and put it in the glove compartment of my Chevy along with the bug, but unlike the bug, I held on to it. I don't know why. My next stop was the sprawling ranch on Simpson Stewart Road where George de Mohrenschildt lived with his wife Jean. As soon as I saw it, I rejected it for the meeting I had planned. For one thing, I couldn't be sure when Jean would be in the house and when she'd be away, and this particular conversation had to be strictly 2 guys. For another, it wasn't quite isolated enough. Paul Quinn College, an all-black school, was close by, and summer classes must have been in. There weren't droves of kids, but I saw plenty, some walking and some on bikes. Not good for my purposes. It was possible that our discussion might be noisy. It was possible it might not be a discussion, at least in the Merriam-Webster sense, at all. Something caught my eye. It was on the de Mohrenschildt's wide front lawn, where sprinklers flung graceful sprays in the air and created rainbows that looked small enough to put in your pocket. 1963 wasn't an election year, but in early April, right around the time somebody had taken a shot at General Edwin Walker, the representative from the 5th District had dropped dead of a heart attack. There was going to be a runoff election for his seat on August 6th. The sign read, "Elect Jenkins to the 5th District. Robert Robbie Jenkins, Dallas's White Knight." According to the papers, Jenkins was that for sure. A right-winger who saw eye to eye with Walker and Walker's spiritual advisor, Billy James Hargis. Robbie Jenkins stood for states' rights, separate but equal schools, and reinstituting the missile crisis blockade around Cuba. The same Cuba de Mohrenschildt had called "that beautiful island." The sign supported a strong feeling that I'd already developed about de Mohrenschildt. He was a dilettante who, at bottom, held no political beliefs at all. He would support whoever amused him or put money in his pocket. Lee Oswald couldn't do the latter. He was so poor he made church mice look loaded. But his humorless dedication to socialism combined with his grandiose personal ambitions had provided de Mohrenschildt with plenty of the former. One deduction seemed obvious. Lee had never trod the lawn or soiled the carpets of this house with his poor boy feet. This was de Mohrenschildt's other life, or one of them. I had a feeling he might have several, keeping them all in various watertight compartments. But that didn't answer the central question. Was he so bored he would have accompanied Lee on his mission to assassinate the fascist monster Edwin Walker? I didn't know him well enough to make even an educated guess. But I would. My heart was set on it. The sign in the window of Frank Fratty's pawn shop read, "Welcome to Guitar Central." And there were plenty of them on display, acoustics, electrics, 12-strings, and one with a double fretboard that reminded me of something I'd seen in a Motley Crue video. Of course, there was all the other detritus of busted lives, rings, brooches, necklaces, radios, small appliances. The woman who confronted me was skinny instead of fat. She wore slacks and a ship and shore blouse instead of a purple dress and mocks, but the stone face was the same as that of a woman I'd met in Derry, and I heard the same words coming out of my mouth. Close enough for government work, anyway. I'd like to discuss a rather large sports-oriented business proposition with Mr. Fratty. Yeah? Is that a bet when it's at home with its feet up? Are you a cop? Yeah, I'm Chief Curry of the Dallas Police. Can't you tell from the glasses and the jowls? I don't see any glasses or jowls, ma'am. That's because I'm in disguise. What do you want to bet on in the middle of the summer, chum? There's nothing to bet on. Case Tiger. Which pug? Case. She rolled her eyes, then shouted back over her shoulder. Better get out here, Dad. You got a live one. Frank Fratty was at least twice Chaz Fratty's age, but the resemblance was still there. They were related. Of course they were. If I mentioned I had once laid a bet with a Mr. Fratty of Derry, Maine, I had no doubt we could have a pleasant little discussion about what a small world it was. Instead of doing that, I proceeded directly to negotiations. Could I put $500 on Tom Case to win his bout against Dick Tiger in Madison Square Garden? Yes, indeedy, Fratty said. You could also stick a red-hot branding iron up your Rudy Patootie. But why would you want to? His daughter yapped brief, bright laughter. What kind of odds would I get? He looked at the daughter. She put up her hands, 2 fingers raised on the left, 1 finger on the right. 2 to 1, that's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous life, my friend. Go see an Ionesco play if you don't believe me. I recommend Victims of Duty. Well, at least he didn't call me cuz, as his Derry cuz had done. Work with me a little on this, Mr. Fratty. He picked up an Epiphone Hummingbird acoustic and began to tune it. He was eerily quick. Give me something to work with then. Or blow on over to Dallas. There's a place called—" "I know the place in Dallas. I prefer Fort Worth. I used to live here." "The fact that you moved shows more sense than wanting to bet on Tom Case." "What about Case by a knockout? Somewhere in the first 7 rounds. What would that get me?" He looked at the daughter. This time she raised 3 fingers on her left hand. "And Case by a knockout in the first 5? She deliberated, then raised a 4th finger. I decided not to push it any farther. I wrote my name in his book and showed him my driver's license, holding my thumb over the Jody address, just as I had when I'd bet on the Pirates at Faith Financial almost 3 years ago. Then I passed over my cash, which was about a quarter of all my remaining liquidity, and tucked the receipt into my wallet. $2,000 would be enough to pay down some more of Sadie's expenses and carry me for my remaining time in Texas. Plus, I wanted to gouge this fratty no more than I'd wanted to gouge Chaz Fratty, even though he had set Bill Turcott on me. "I'll be back the day after the dance," I said. "Have my money ready." The daughter laughed and lit a cigarette. "Ain't that what the chorus girl said to the Archbishop?" "Is your name Marjorie by any chance?" I asked. She froze with the cigarette in front of her and smoke trickling from between her lips. "How'd you know?" She saw my expression and laughed. "Actually, it's Wanda Sport. I hope you bet better than you guess names." Heading back to my car, I hoped the same thing. Chapter 25. I stayed with Sadie on the morning of August 5th until they put her on a gurney and rolled her down to the operating room. There, Dr. Ellerton was waiting for her along with enough other docs to field a basketball team. Her eyes were shiny with pre-op dope. "Wish me luck." I bent and kissed her. All the luck in the world. It was 3 hours before she was wheeled back to her room. Room, same picture on the wall, same horrible squatting commode, fast asleep and snoring. The left side of her face covered in a fresh bandage. Rhonda McKinley, the nurse with the fullback shoulders, let me stay with her until she came around a little, which was a big infraction of the rules. Visiting hours are more stringent in the land of Ago, unless the head nurse has taken a shine to you, that is. "How are you?" I asked, taking Sadie's hand. "Sore and sleepy." "Go back to sleep then, honey." "Maybe next time." Her words trailed off in a furry huzz sound. Her eyes closed, but she forced them open with an effort. "We'll be better in your place." Then she was gone. And I had something to think about. When I went back to the nurse's station, Rhonda told me that Dr. Ellerton was waiting for me downstairs in the cafeteria. "We'll keep her tonight and probably tomorrow, too," he said. "The last thing we want is for any sort of infection to develop." I thought of this later, of course. One of those things that's funny, but not very. "How did it go?" "As well as can be expected, but the damage Clayton inflicted was very serious. Pending her recovery, I'm going to schedule her second go-round for November or December." He lit a cigarette, chuffed out smoke, and said, "This is a hell of a surgical team, and we're going to do everything we can. But there are limits." "Yes, I know." I was pretty sure I knew something else as well. There were going to be no more surgeries. Here, at least. The next time Sadie went under the knife, it wouldn't be a knife at all. It would be a laser. In my place. Small economies always come back and bite you in the ass. I'd had the phone taken out of my Neely Street apartment in order to save $8 or $10 a month, and now I wanted it. But there was a U-Totem 4 blocks away with a phone booth next to the Coke cooler. I had De Mohrenschildt's number on a scrap of paper. I dropped a dime and dialed. "De Mohrenschild residence, how may I help you?" Not John's voice, a maid, probably. Where did the de Mohrenschildt box come from? I'd like to speak to George, please. I'm afraid he's at the office, sir. I grabbed a pen from my breast pocket. Can you give me that number? Yes, sir. Chapel 5, 6323. Thanks. I wrote it on the back of my hand. May I say who called if you don't reach him, sir? I hung up. That chill was enveloping me again. I welcomed it. If I'd ever needed cold clarity, it was now. I dropped another dime and this time got a secretary who told me I'd reached the Centrex Corporation. I told her I wanted to speak to Mr. de Mohrenschildt. She, of course, wanted to know why. Tell him it's about Jean-Claude Duvalier and Lee Oswald. Tell him it's to his advantage. Your name, sir? Puddentane wouldn't do here. John Lennon. Please hold, Mr. Lennon. I'll see if he's available. There was no canned music, which on the whole seemed an improvement. I leaned against the wall of the hot booth and stared at the sign reading, "If you smoke, please turn on fan." I didn't smoke, but turned the fan on anyway. It didn't help much. There was a click in my ear, loud enough to make me wince, and the secretary said, "You're connected, Mr. D." "Hello?" That jovial, booming actor's voice. "Hello? Mr. Lennon?" "Hello, is this line secure?" "What do you—" "Of course it is. Just a minute. Let me shut the door." There was a pause, then he was back. "What's this about?" "Haiti, my friend, and oil leases." "What's this about Monsieur Duvalier and that guy Oswald?" There was no worry in his voice, just cheerful curiosity. "Oh, you know them much better than that," I said. "Go ahead and call them Baby Doc and Lee, why don't you?" "I'm awfully busy today, Mr. Lennon. If you don't tell me what this is about, I'm afraid I'll have to—" "Baby Doc can approve the oil leases in Haiti you've been wanting for the last 5 years. You know this. He's his father's right-hand man. He runs the Tonton Macoute, and he's next in line for the big chair. He likes you, and we like you." De Mohrenschildt began to sound less like an actor and more like a real guy. "When you say we, do you mean—" "We all like you, de Mohrenschildt, but we're worried about your association with Oswald." "Jesus, I hardly know the guy. I haven't seen him in 6 or 8 months." "You saw him on Easter Sunday. You brought his little girl a stuffed rabbit." A very long pause. Then, "All right, I guess I did. I forgot about that." "Did you forget about someone taking a shot at Edwin Walker?" "What has that got to do with me, or my business?" His puzzled outrage was almost impossible to disbelieve. Keyword, almost. "Come on now," I said. "You accused Oswald of doing it." "I was joking, goddammit." I gave him 2 beats, then said, "Do you know what company I work for, de Mohrenschildt? I'll give you a hint. It's not Standard Oil." There was silence on the line while de Mohrenschildt ran through the bullshit I'd spouted so far. Except it wasn't bullshit, not entirely. I'd known about the stuffed rabbit, and I'd known about the "how did you miss" crack he'd made after his wife spotted the rifle. The conclusion was pretty clear. My company was the company. And the only question in de Mohrenschildt's mind right now, I hoped, was how much more of his no doubt interesting life we'd bugged. "This is a misunderstanding, Mr. Lennon." "I hope for your sake that it is, because it looks to us like you might have primed him to take the shot, going on and on about what a racist Walker is and how he's going to be the next American Hitler." "That's totally untrue." I ignored this. "But it's not our chief worry. Our chief worry is that you may have accompanied Mr. Oswald on his errand last April 10th. Oh, mein Gott! That's insane! If you can prove that, and if you promise to stay away from the unstable Mr. Oswald in the future, he's in New Orleans, for God's sake. Shut up, I said. We know where he is. And what he's doing, handing out fair play for Cuba leaflets. If he doesn't stop soon, he'll wind up in jail. Indeed he would, and in less than a week. His Uncle Dutz, the one associated with Carlos Marcello, would go his bail. He'll be back in Dallas soon enough, but you won't see him. Your little game is over. I tell you, I never... Those leases can still be yours, but not unless you can prove you weren't with Oswald on April 10th. Can you do that? Let me think. There was a long pause. Yes, I think I can. Then let's meet. When? Tonight. 9 o'clock. I have people to answer to, and they'd be very unhappy with me if I gave you time to build an alibi. Come to the house. I'll send Jean out to a movie with her girlfriends. I have another place in mind, and you won't need directions to find it. I told him what I had in mind. Why there? He sounded honestly puzzled. Just come. And if you don't want the Duvaliers père and fils very angry at you, my friend, come alone. I hung up. I was back at the hospital at 6 on the dot and visited with Sadie for half an hour. Her head was clear again, and she claimed her pain wasn't too bad. At 6:30, I kissed her good cheek and told her I had to go. Your business? She asked. Your real business? Yes. No one gets hurt unless it's absolutely necessary, right? I nodded. And never by mistake. Be careful. Like walking on eggs. She tried to smile. It turned into a wince as the freshly flayed left side of her face pulled against itself. Her eyes looked over my shoulder. I turned to see Deke and Ellie in the doorway. They had dressed in their best. Deke in a summer weight suit, string tie, and town cowboy hat. Ellie in a pink silk dress. We can wait if you want us to, Ellie said. No, come on in. I was just leaving, but don't stay long. She's tired. I kissed Sadie twice, dry lips and moist forehead. Then I drove back to West Neely Street, where I spread out the items I'd bought at the costume and novelty shop. I worked slowly and carefully in front of the bathroom mirror, referring often to the directions and wishing Sadie were here to help me. I wasn't worried that de Mohrenschildt would take a look at me and say, "Haven't I seen you before?" What I wanted to make sure of was that he wouldn't recognize John Lannon later on. Depending on how believable he was, I might have to come back on him. If so, I'd want to take him by surprise. I glued on the mustache first. It was a bushy one, making me look like an outlaw in a John Ford Western. Next came the makeup, which I used on my face and hands to give myself a rancher's tan. There were horn-rimmed specs with plain glass lenses. I had briefly considered dyeing my hair, but that would have created a parallel with John Clayton that I couldn't have faced. Instead, I yanked on a San Antonio Bullets baseball cap. When I was finished, I hardly recognized myself in the mirror. Nobody gets hurt unless it absolutely has to happen, I told the stranger in the mirror. And never by mistake. If we get that straight... The stranger nodded, but the eyes behind the fake glasses were cool. The last thing I did before leaving was to take my revolver from the closet shelf and shove it in my pocket. I got to the deserted parking lot at the end of Mercedes Street, 20 minutes early, but de Mohrenschildt was already there. His gaudy Cadillac butted up against the brick backside of the Montgomery Ward warehouse. That meant he was anxious. Excellent. I looked around, almost expecting to see the jump rope girls, but of course they were in for the night. possibly sleeping and dreaming of Charlie Chaplin touring France just to watch the ladies dance. I parked near de Mohrenschildt's yacht, rolled down my window, stuck out my left hand, and curled the index finger in a beckoning gesture. For a moment, de Mohrenschildt sat where he was, as if unsure. Then he got out. The big-time strut wasn't in evidence. He looked frightened and furtive. That was also excellent. In one hand he held a file folder. From the flat look of it, there wasn't much inside. I hoped it wasn't just a prop. If it was, we were going to dance, and it wouldn't be the Lindy Hop. He opened the door, leaned in, and said, "Look, you're not going to shoot me or anything, are you?" "Nope," I said, hoping I sounded bored. "If I was from the FBI, you might have to worry about that, but I'm not, and you know I'm not. You've done business with us before. I hope to God Al's notes were right about that." "Is this car bugged? Are you? If you're careful about what you say, you won't have anything to worry about, will you? Now get in." He got in and shut the door. "About those leases." "You can discuss those another time with other people. Oil isn't my specialty. My specialty is dealing with people who behave indiscreetly. And your relationship with Oswald has been very indiscreet." "I was curious, that's all. He's a man who manages to defect to Russia, then re-defect to the United States. He's a semi-educated hillbilly, but he's surprisingly crafty. Also," he cleared his throat, "I have a friend who wants to fuck his wife." "We know about that," I said, thinking of Boo, just another George in a seemingly endless parade of them. How happy I would be to escape the echo chamber of the past. My sole interest is making sure you had nothing to do with that botched Walker hit. "Look at this. I took it from my wife's scrapbook." He opened the folder, removed the single page of newsprint it contained, and passed it over. I turned on the Chevy's dome light, hoping my tan wouldn't look like the makeup it was. On the other hand, who cared? It would strike de Mohrenschildt as just one more bit of cloak and dagger spookery. The sheet was from the April 12th Morning News. I knew the feature. "Around Town" was probably read a lot more closely by most Dallasites than the world and national news. There were lots of names in bold-faced type and lots of pics showing men and women in evening dress. De Mohrenschildt had used red ink to circle a squib halfway down. In the accompanying photo, George and Jean were unmistakable. He was in a tux and flashing a grin that seemed to show as many teeth as there are keys on a piano. Jean was displaying an amazing amount of cleavage, which the third person at the table appeared to be inspecting closely. All three held up champagne glasses. "This is Friday's paper," I said. "The Walker shooting was on Wednesday." "These around-town items are always 2 days old, because they're about the nightlife, dig? Besides, don't just look at the picture. Read it, man. It's right there, in black and white." I checked, but I knew he was telling the truth as soon as I saw the other man's name in the newspaper's hacha-hacha bold-faced type. The harmonic echo was as loud as a guitar amp set on reverb. Local oil Raja, George de Mohrenschildt, and wife Jean lifted a glass, or maybe it was a dozen, at the Carousel Club on Wednesday night, celebrating the scrump-tiddly-uptious lady's birthday. How old? The lovebirds weren't telling, but to us she doesn't look a day over 23. Skidoo. They were hosted by the Carousel's jovial panjandrum, Jack Ruby, who sent over a bottle of bubbly and then joined them for a toast. "Happy birthday, Jean, and long may you wave." The champagne was rot gut, and I had a hangover until 3 the next afternoon, but it was worth it if you're satisfied. I was. I was also fascinated. How well do you know this guy Ruby? De Mohrenschildt sniffed, all his baronial snobbery expressed in a single quick inhale through flared nostrils. "Not well. And don't want to. He's a crazy little Jew who buys the police free drinks so they'll look the other way when he uses his fists, which he likes to do. One day, his temper will get him in trouble. Jean likes the strippers. They get her hot." He shrugged as if to say, who could understand women? "Now, are you—" He looked down, saw the gun in my fist, and stopped talking. His eyes widened. His tongue came out and licked his lips. It made a peculiar wet slurping sound as he drew it back into his mouth. "Am I satisfied? Was that what you were going to ask?" I prodded him with the gun barrel and took considerable pleasure in his gasp. Killing changes a man, I tell you. It coarsens him. But in my defense, if there was ever a man who deserved a salutary scare, it was this one. Marguerite was partially responsible for what her youngest son had become, and there was plenty of responsibility for Lee himself. All those half-formed dreams of glory, but de Mohrenschildt had played a part. And was it some complicated plot hatched deep in the bowels of the CIA? No. Slumming simply amused him. So did the rage and disappointment baking up from the plugged oven of Lee's disturbed personality. "Please," de Mohrenschildt whispered. "I'm satisfied. But listen to me, you windbag. You're never going to meet with Lee Oswald again. You're never going to talk to him on the phone. You're never going to mention a word of this conversation to his wife, to his mother, to George Boo, to any of the other émigrés. Do you understand that?" "Yes, absolutely. I was growing bored with him anyway." "Not half as bored as I am with you. If I find out you've talked to Lee, I'll kill you. Capiche?" "Yes, on the leases." "Someone will be in touch. Now get the fuck out of my car." He did so post-haste. When he was behind the wheel of the caddy, I reached out again with my left hand. Instead of beckoning, this time I used my index finger to point at Mercedes Street. He went. I sat where I was a little while longer, looking at the clipping which he in his haste had forgotten to take with him. The de Mohrenschildts and Jack Ruby. Glasses raised. Was it a signpost pointing toward a conspiracy after all? The Tin Hat crew, who believed in things like shooters popping up from sewers and Oswald doppelgangers, probably would have thought so. But I knew better. It was just another harmonic. This was the land of a go, where everything echoed. I felt I had closed Al Templeton's window of uncertainty to the merest draft. Oswald was going to return to Dallas on the 3rd of October. According to Al's notes, he would get hired as a common laborer at the Texas School Book Depository in the middle of October. Except that wasn't going to happen, because sometime between the 3rd and the 16th, I was going to end his miserable, dangerous life. I was allowed to spring Sadie from the hospital on the morning of August 7th. She was quiet on the ride back to Jody. I could tell she was still in considerable pain, but she rested a companionable hand on my thigh for most of the drive. When we turned off Highway 77 at the big Denholm Lions billboard, she said, "I'm going back to school in September." "Sure?" "Yes. If I could stand up in front of the whole town at the Grange, I guess I can manage it in front of a bunch of kids in the school library. Besides, I have a feeling we're going to need the money. Unless you have some source of income I don't know about. You've got to be almost broke, thanks to me. I should have some money coming in at the end of the month." "The fight?" I nodded. "Good. And I'll only have to listen to the whispers and the giggles for a little while anyway, because when you go, I'm going with you." She paused. "If it's still what you want." "Sadie, it's all I want." We turned onto Main Street. Jem Needham was just finishing his rounds in his milk truck. Bill Gavery was putting out fresh loaves of bread under cheesecloth in front of the bakery. From a passing car, Jan and Dean were singing that in Surf City there were 2 girls for every boy. Will I like it, Jake, in your place? I hope so, hon. Is it very different? I smiled. People pay more for gasoline and have more buttons to push. Otherwise, it's about the same. That hot August was as close to a honeymoon as we ever managed, and it was sweet. Any pretense that I was rooming with Deke Simmons pretty well went out the window, although I still kept my car in his driveway at night. Sadie recovered quickly from the latest insult to her flesh, and although her eye sagged and her cheek was still scarred and deeply hollowed where Clayton had cut through to the inside of her mouth, there was visible improvement. Ellerton and his crew had done a good job with what they had. We read books sitting side by side on her couch, with her fan blowing back our hair. The group for her, Jude the Obscure for me. We had backyard picnics in the shade of her prized Chinese pistachio tree and drank gallons of iced coffee. Sadie began to cut back on the smokes again. We watched Rawhide and Ben Casey and Route 66. One night she tuned in The New Adventures of Ellery Queen, but I asked her to change the channel. I didn't like mysteries, I said. Before bed, I carefully smoothed ointment on her wounded face, and once we were in bed, it was good. Leave it at that. One day outside the grocery store, I ran into that upstanding school board member, Jessica Caltrop. She said she would like to speak to me for a moment on what she called a delicate subject. What might that be, Ms. Caltrop? I asked. Because I got ice cream in here and I'd like to get home with it before it melts. She gave me a chilly smile that could have kept my French vanilla firm for hours. Would home be on Beetree Lane, Mr. Emberson? With the unfortunate Miss Dunhill? And that would be your business? How? The smile froze a little more deeply. As a member of the school board, I have to make sure that the morality of our faculty is spotless. If you and Miss Dunhill are living together, that is a matter of grave concern to me. Teenagers are impressionable. They imitate what they see in their elders. You think? After 15 years or so in the classroom, I would have said they observe adult behavior and then run the other way as fast as they can. I'm sure we could have an illuminating discussion on how you view teenage psychology, Mr. Emerson, but that's not why I asked to speak to you, uncomfortable as I find it. She didn't look a bit uncomfortable. If you are living in sin with Miss Dunhill, sin, I said. Now there's an interesting word. Jesus said that he without it was free to cast the first stone. Or she, I suppose. Are you without it, Miss Caltrop? This discussion is not about me. But we could make it about you. I could make it about you. I could, for instance, start asking around about the Woods colt you dropped once upon a time. She recoiled as if slapped and took 2 steps back toward the brick wall of the market. I took 2 steps forward. My grocery bags curled in my arms. I find that repulsive and offensive. If you were still teaching, I'm sure you would, but I'm not. So you need to listen to me very carefully. It's my understanding that you had a kid when you were 16 and living on Sweetwater Ranch. I don't know if the father was one of your schoolmates, a saddle tramp, or even your own father. You're disgusting. True, and sometimes it's such a pleasure. I don't care who it was, but I care about Sadie, who's been through more pain and heartache than you've felt in your whole life. Now I had her pinned against the brick wall. She was looking up at me, her eyes bright with terror. In another time and place, I could have felt sorry for her, not now. If you say one word, about Sadie. One word to anybody. I'll make it my business to find out where that kid of yours is now, and I'll spread the word from one end of this town to the other. Do you understand me? Get out of my way. Let me pass. Do you understand me? Yes. Yes. Good. I stepped back. Live your life, Miss Caltrop. I suspect it's been pretty gray since you were 16. Busy, though. Inspecting other people's dirty laundry does keep a person busy, but you live it. And let us live ours. She sidled to her left along the brick wall in the direction of the parking lot behind the market. Her eyes were bulging. They never left me. I smiled pleasantly. Before this discussion becomes something that never happened, I want to give you a piece of advice, little lady. It comes straight from my heart. I love her, and you do not want to fuck with a man in love. If you mess in my business or Sadie's, I will try my best to make you the sorriest blue-nosed bitch in Texas. That is my sincere promise to you. She ran for the parking lot. She did it awkwardly, like someone who hasn't moved at a pace faster than a stately walk in a long time. In her brown shin-length skirt, opaque flesh-toned hose, and sensible brown shoes, she was the spirit of the age. Her hair was coming loose from its bun. Once I had no doubt she had worn it down, the way men like to see a woman's hair. But that had been a long time ago. "And have a nice day," I called after her. Sadie came into the kitchen while I was putting things away in the icebox. "You were gone a long time. I was starting to worry." I got talking. You know how it is in Jody, always someone to pass the time of day with. She smiled. The smile was coming a little more easily now. "You're a sweet guy." I thanked Sadie and told her she was a sweet gal. I wondered if Caltrop would talk to Fred Miller, the other school board member who saw himself as a guardian of town morality. I didn't think so. It wasn't just that I knew about her youthful indiscretion. I had set out to scare her. It had worked with de Mohrenschildt, and it had worked with her. Scaring people is a dirty job, but somebody has to do it. Sadie crossed the kitchen and put an arm around me. "What would you say to a weekend at the Candlewood bungalows before school starts, just like in the old days?" I suppose that's very forward of Sadie, isn't it? "Well, now, that depends." I took her in my arms. "Are we talking about a dirty weekend?" She blushed, except for around the scar. The flesh there remained white and shiny. "Absolutely filthy, senor." "The sooner the better, then." It wasn't actually a dirty weekend, unless you believe, as the Jessica Caltrops of the world seem to, that love-making is dirty. It's true that we spent a lot of it in bed, but we also spent a fair amount outside. Sadie was a tireless walker, and there was a vast open field on the flank of a hill behind the Candlewood. It was rioting with late summer wildflowers. We spent most of Saturday afternoon there. Sadie could name some of the blooms: Spanish dagger, prickly poppy, something called yucca birdweed, but at others she could only shake her head, then bend over to smell whatever aromas there were to be smelled. We walked hand in hand, with high grass brushing against our jeans and big clouds with fluffed-out tops sailing the high Texas sky. Long shutters of light and shadow slipped across the field. There was a cool breeze that day and no refinery smell in the air. At the top of the hill, we turned and looked back. The bungalows were small and insignificant on the tree-dotted sweep of the prairie. The road was a ribbon. Sadie sat down, drew her knees to her chest, and clasped her arms around her shins. I sat down beside her. "I want to ask you something," she said. "All right." "It's not about where you come from. That's more than I want to think about just now. It's about the man you came to stop, the one you say is going to kill the president." I considered this. "Delicate subject, hon." Do you remember me telling you that I'm close to a big machine full of sharp teeth? Yes. I said I wouldn't let you stand next to me while I was fooling with it. I've already said more than I meant to, and probably more than I should have, because the past doesn't want to be changed. It fights back when you try, and the bigger the potential change, the harder it fights. I don't want you to be hurt. I already have been, she said quietly. Are you asking if that was my fault? No, honey. She put a hand on my cheek. No. Well, it may have been, at least partially. There's a thing called the butterfly effect. There were hundreds of them fluttering on the slope before us, as if to illustrate that very fact. I know what that is, she said. There's a Ray Bradbury story about it. Really? It's called A Sound of Thunder. It's very beautiful and very disturbing. But Jake, Johnny was crazy long before you came on the scene. I left him long before you came on the scene. And if you hadn't come along, some other man might have. I'm sure he wouldn't have been as nice as you. But I wouldn't have known that, would I? Time is a tree with many branches. What do you want to know about the guy, Sadie? Mostly why you don't just call the police, anonymously, of course, and report him. I pulled a stem of grass to chew while I thought about that. The first thing to cross my mind was something de Mohrenschildt had said in the Montgomery Ward parking lot. He's a semi-educated hillbilly, but he's surprisingly crafty. It was a good assessment. Lee had escaped Russia when he was tired of it. He would also be crafty enough to escape the book depository after shooting the president in spite of the almost immediate police and Secret Service response. Of course it was a quick response. Plenty of people were going to see exactly where the shots came from. Lee would be questioned at gunpoint in the second-floor break room, even before the speeding motorcade delivered the dying president to Parkland Hospital. The cop who did the questioning would recall later that the young man had been reasonable and persuasive. Once foreman Roy Truly vouched for him as an employee, the cop would let Ozzie Rabbit go and then hurry upstairs to seek the source of the gunshots. It was possible to believe that, if not for his encounter with Patrolman Tippett, Lee might not have been captured for days or weeks. Sadie, the Dallas cops are going to shock the world with their incompetence. I'd be nuts to trust them. They might not even act on an anonymous tip. But why? Why wouldn't they? Right now, because the guy's not even in Texas. And he doesn't mean to come back. He's planning to defect to Cuba. Cuba? Why in the world Cuba? I shook my head. It doesn't matter. Because it's not going to work. He's going to return to Dallas, but not with any plan to kill the president. He doesn't even know Kennedy's coming to Dallas. Kennedy himself doesn't know because the trip hasn't been scheduled yet. But you know. Yes. Because in the time you come from, all this is in the history books. The broad strokes, yes. I got the specifics from the friend who sent me here. I'll tell you the whole story someday when this is over, but not now. Not while the machine with all those teeth is still running full tilt. The important thing is this. If the police question the guy at any point before mid-November, he's going to sound completely innocent because he is innocent. Another of those vast cloud shadows rolled over us, temporarily dropping the temperature by 10 degrees or so. For all I know, he may not have made up his mind entirely until the moment he pulled the trigger. You speak as if it's already happened, she marveled. In my world, it has. What's important about mid-November? On the 16th, the morning news is going to tell Dallas about Kennedy's motorcade down Main Street. The guy will read that and realize the cars will go right past the place where he's working. He's probably going to think it's a message from God, or maybe the ghost of Karl Marx. Where's he going to work? I shook my head again. That wasn't safe for her to know. Of course, none of this was safe. Yet, I've said it before, but it bears repeating, what a relief to tell at least some of it to another person. If the police talked to him, they might at least frighten him out of doing it. She was right, but what a horrifying risk. I'd already taken a smaller one by talking to de Mohrenschildt, but de Mohrenschildt wanted those oil leases. Also, I'd done more than frighten him. I'd scared the living bejesus out of him. I thought he'd keep mum. Lee, on the other hand. I took Sadie's hand. Right now, I can predict where this man's going the same way I could predict where a train is going to go, because it can't leave the tracks. Once I step in, once I meddle, all bets are off. If you talk to him yourself? A truly nightmarish image came into my mind. I saw Lee telling the cops, "The idea was put into my head by a man named George Amberson. If it hadn't been for him, I never would have thought of it." I don't think that would work either. In a small voice, she asked, "Will you have to kill him?" I didn't answer, which was an answer in itself, of course. "And you really know this is going to happen?" "Yes." "The way you know Tom Case is going to win that fight on the 29th?" "Yes." "Even though everybody who knows boxing says Tiger's going to murder him?" I smiled. "You've been reading the sports pages." "Yes, I have." She took the piece of grass from my mouth and put it in her own. "I've never been to a prize fight. Will you take me? It's not exactly live, you know. It's on a big TV screen." "I know. Will you take me?" There were plenty of good-looking women in the Dallas auditorium on fight night, but Sadie got her fair share of admiring glances. She had made herself up carefully for the occasion, but even the most skillful makeup could only minimize the damage to her face, not completely hide it. Her dress helped matters considerably. It clung smoothly to her body line and had a deep scoop neck. The brilliant stroke was a felt fedora given to her by Ellen Doherty when Sadie told her that I had asked her to go to the prize fight with me. The hat was an almost exact match for the one Ingrid Bergman wears in the final scene of Casablanca. With its insouciant slant, it set her face off perfectly, and, of course, it slanted to the left, putting a deep triangle of shadow over her bad cheek. It was better than any makeup job. When she came out of the bedroom for inspection, I told her she was absolutely gorgeous. The look of relief on her face and the excited sparkle in her eyes suggested that she knew I was doing more than trying to make her feel good. There was heavy traffic coming into Dallas, and by the time we reached our seats, the third of 5 undercard matches was going on. A large black man and an even larger white man slowly pummeling each other while the crowd cheered. Not one, but 4 enormous screens hung over the polished hardwood floor where the Dallas Spurs played, badly, during the basketball season. The picture was provided by multiple rear-screen projection systems, and, although the colors were muddy, almost rudimentary, the images themselves were crisp. Sadie was impressed. In truth, so was I. "Are you nervous?" she asked. "Yes. Even though, when I bet on the Pirates to win the World Series back in '60, I knew. Here, I'm depending entirely on my friend, who got it off the internet." "What in the world is that?" "Sci-fi, like Ray Bradbury." "Oh, okay." Then she put her fingers between her lips and whistled. "Hey, beer man." The beer man, decked out in a vest, cowboy hat, and silver-studded concho belt, sold us 2 bottles of Lone Star, glass, not plastic, with paper cups nestled over the necks. I gave him $1 and told him to keep the change. Sadie took hers, bumped it against mine, and said, "Luck, Jake. If I need it, I'm in one hell of a jam." She lit a cigarette, adding her smoke to the blue veil hanging around the lights. I was on her right, and from where I sat, she looked perfect. I tapped her on the shoulder, and when she turned, I kissed her lightly on her parted lips. "Kid," I said, "we'll always have Parrish." She grinned. "The one in Texas, maybe." A groan went up from the crowd. The black fighter had just knocked the white one on his ass. The main bout commenced at 9:30. Close-ups of the fighters filled the screens, and when the camera centered on Tom Case, my heart sank. There were threads of gray in his curly black hair. His cheeks were becoming jowls. His midsection flabbed over his trunks. Worst of all, though, were his somehow bewildered eyes, which peered from puffy sacks of scar tissue. He didn't look entirely sure about where he was. The audience of 1,500 or so mostly cheered. Tom Case was a hometown boy, after all. But I also heard a healthy chorus of boos. Sitting there slumped on his stool, holding the ropes with his gloved hands, he looked like he'd already lost. Dick Tiger, on the other hand, was up on his feet, shadowboxing and skipping nimbly in his black high-tops. Sadie leaned close to me and whispered, "This doesn't look so good, honey." That was the understatement of the century. It looked terrible. Down front, where the screen must have seemed like a looming cliff with blurred moving figures projected on it, I saw Akiva Roth squire a mink-wearing dolly in Garbo shades to a seat that would have been ringside if the fight hadn't been on a screen. In front of Sadie and me, a chubby man smoking a cigar turned around and said, "Who you got, beautiful?" "Case," Sadie said bravely. The chubby cigar smoker laughed. "Well, you got a good heart anyway. Care to put a 10 spot on that?" "Will you give me 4-1 if Case knocks him out?" "If Case knocks Tiger out? Lady, you're on." He stuck out a hand. Sadie shook it. Then she turned to me with a defiant little smile playing around the corner of her mouth that still worked. "Pretty bold," I said. "Not at all," she said. "Tiger's going down in 5. I can see the future." The ring announcer, wearing a tux and a pound of hair tonic, trotted to center ring, yanked down a mic on a silver cord, and gave the fighters stats in a rolling Carney Barker's voice. The national anthem played. Men yanked off their hats and put their hands over their hearts. I could feel my own heart thudding rapidly, at least 120 beats a minute and maybe more. The auditorium was air-conditioned, but sweat was rolling down the back of my neck and humidifying my armpits. A girl in a swimsuit strutted around the ring in high heels, holding up a card with a big number 1 on it. The bell clanged. Tom Case shuffled into the ring with a resigned expression on his face. Dick Tiger bounded happily to meet him, feinted with his right hand, then unleashed a compact left hook that decked Case exactly 12 seconds into the fight. The crowds, the one here and the one in the garden 2,000 miles away, let out a disgusted groan. The hand Sadie had rested on my thigh seemed to spring claws as it tensed and dug in. "Tell that 10 to say goodbye to his friends, beautiful," the chubby cigar smoker said gleefully. "Ow, what the fuck were you thinking?" Dick Tiger retreated to his corner and stood there bouncing nonchalantly on the balls of his feet while the ref commenced the count, sweeping his right arm up and down dramatically. On 3, Case stirred. On 5, he sat up. On 7, he took a knee. And on 9, he rose and lifted his gloves. The ref took the fighter's face in his hands and asked a question. Case replied. The ref nodded, beckoned to Tiger, and stepped aside. The Tiger man, perhaps anxious to get to the steak dinner waiting for him at Sardi's, rushed in for the kill. Case didn't try to escape him. His speed had left him behind long ago, during some tank town fight in Moline, Illinois, or New Haven, Connecticut. But he was able to cover up and clinch. He did a lot of that, resting his head on Tiger's shoulder like a tired tango dancer and pounding his gloves weakly on Tiger's back. The crowd began to boo. When the bell rang and Case plodded back to his stool with his head down and his gloved fists dangling, they booed louder. "He stinks, beautiful," the chubby man remarked. Sadie looked at me anxiously. "What do you think?" "I think he made it through the first, anyway. What I really thought was that someone should stick a fork in Tom Case's sagging butt, because to me he looked almost done." The chick and the Jansen did her thing again, this time holding up a 2. The bell clanged. Once again Tiger bounded and Case plodded. My guy continued to move in close so he could clinch whenever possible, but I noticed he was now managing to deflect the left hook that had devastated him in the first round. Tiger worked on the old fighter's gut with piston-like shots of his right hand, but there must have been quite a lot of muscle left under that flab, because they didn't seem to affect Case very much. At one point, Tiger pushed Case back and gestured with both gloves in a come on gesture. The crowd cheered. Case only stared at him, so Tiger moved in. Case immediately clinched. The crowd groaned. The bell rang. "My granny could give Tiger a better show," the cigar smoker grumbled. "Maybe," Sadie said, lighting her third cigarette of the fight. "But he's still on his feet, isn't he?" "Not for long, sugar. The next time one of those left hooks gets through, it's going to be case closed," he chortled. The third round was more clinching and shuffling, but in the fourth, Case let his guard drop slightly and Tiger hit him with a barrage of lefts and rights to the head that brought the audience to its feet, roaring. Akiva Roth's girlfriend was with them. Mr. Roth himself retained his seat, but did trouble himself enough to cup his lady friend's ass with a beringed right hand. Case fell back against the ropes, shooting rights at Tiger, and one of those blows got through. It looked pretty feeble, but I saw sweat fly from the Tiger man's hair as he shook his head. There was a bewildered where-did-that-come-from expression on his face. Then he moved in again and went back to work. Blood began oozing from a cut beside Case's left eye. Before Tiger could increase the damage from a trickle to a gush, the bell rang. "If you hand over that 10 now, beautiful," the pudgy cigar smoker said, "you and your boyfriend will be able to beat the traffic." "Tell you what," Sadie said, "I'll give you one chance to call it off and save yourself $40. The pudgy cigar smoker laughed. "Beautiful and a sense of humor. If that long, tall helicopter you're with treats you bad, sugar, come home with me." In Case's corner, the trainer was working frantically on the bad eye, squeezing something from a tube and mushing it around with the tips of his fingers. It looked like crazy glue to me, except I don't think that had been invented yet. Then he slapped Case in the chops with a wet towel. The bell rang. Dick Tiger bored in, jamming with his right and hooking with his left. Case dodged one left hook, and, for the first time in the fight, Tiger launched a right uppercut at the older man's head. Case managed to pull back just enough to keep from taking it full on the jaw, but it connected with his cheek. The force of it distorted his entire face into a horror house grimace. He staggered back. Tiger came at him. The crowd was up again, bellowing for blood. We rose with them. Sadie's hands were over her mouth. Tiger had Case pinned in one of the neutral corners and was hammering him with rights and lefts. I could see Case sagging. I could see the lights in his eyes dimming. One more left hook, or that cannon shot right, and they would go out. "Put him down!" the chubby cigar smoker was screaming. "Put him down, Dickie! Knock his block off! Tiger hit him low, below the belt. Probably not on purpose, but the ref stepped in. While he cautioned Tiger about the low blow, I watched Case to see how he would use this temporary respite. I saw something come into his face that I recognized. I had seen Lee wearing the same expression on the day he'd been giving Marina hell about the zipper of her skirt. It had appeared when Marina had come back on him, accusing him of bringing her and the baby to a pigsty, and then twirling her finger around her ear in a "you're crazy" gesture. All at once, this had stopped being just a payday to Tom Case. The ref stepped aside. Tiger bored in, but this time, Case stepped to meet him. What happened during the next 20 seconds was the most electrifying, terrifying thing I have ever seen as part of an audience. The two of them simply stood toe-to-toe, slugging each other in the face, the chest, the shoulders, the gut. There was no bobbing, no weaving, no fancy footwork. They were bulls in a pasture. Case's nose broke and gushed blood. Tiger's lower lip smashed back against his teeth and split. Blood poured down both sides of his chin, making him look like a vampire after a big meal. Everyone in the auditorium was on their feet and screaming. Sadie was jumping up and down. Her fedora fell off, exposing the scarred cheek. She took no notice. Nobody else did either. On the huge screens, World War III was in full swing. Case lowered his head to take one of those bazooka rights, and I saw Tiger grimace as his fist connected with hard bone. He took a step backward, and Case unloaded a monster uppercut. Tiger turned his head, avoiding the worst of it, but his mouthpiece flew free and rolled across the canvas. Case moved in, throwing haymaker lefts and rights. There was no artistry to them, only raw, angry power. Tiger backpedaled, tripped over his own feet, and went down. Case stood over him, seemingly unsure what to do, or perhaps even where he was. His frantically signaling trainer caught his eye, and he plodded back to his corner. The ref commenced his count. On 4, Tiger took a knee. On 6, he was on his feet. After the mandatory 8 count, the fight recommenced. I looked at the big clock in the corner of the screen and saw there were 15 seconds left in the round. Not enough. It's not enough time. Case plodded forward. Tiger threw that devastating left hook. Case jerked his head to one side, and when the glove had flown past his face, he lashed out with his right. This time it was Dick Tiger's face that distorted, and when he went down, he didn't get up. The pudgy man looked at the tattered remains of his cigar, then threw it on the floor. Jesus wept. Yes, Sadie chirruped, resetting her fedora at the proper insouciant slant. On a stack of blueberry pancakes, and the disciples said they were the best they ever ate. Now pay up. By the time we got back to Jody, August 29th had become August 30th. But we were both too excited to sleep. We made love, then came out to the kitchen and ate pie in our underwear. Well, I said, what do you think? That I never want to go to another prize fight. That was pure bloodlust. And I was up on my feet cheering with the rest. For a few seconds, maybe even a full minute, I wanted Case to kill that dancing, all-full-of-himself dandy. Then, I couldn't wait to get back here and jump into bed with you. That wasn't about love just now, Jake. That was about burning. I said nothing. Sometimes there's nothing to say. She reached across the table, plucked a crumb from my chin, and popped it into my mouth. Tell me it's not hate. What's not? The reason you feel you have to stop this man on your own? She saw me start to open my mouth and held up a hand to stop me. I heard everything you said, all your reasons, but you have to tell me they are reasons and not just what I saw in that man Case's eyes when Tiger hit him in the trunks. I can love you if you're a man, and I can love you if you're a hero, I guess, although for some reason that seems a lot harder. But I don't think I can love a vigilante. I thought of how Lee looked at his wife when he wasn't mad at her. I thought about the conversation I'd overheard when he and his little girl were splashing in the bath. I thought about his tears outside the bus station when he'd held Junie and nuzzled beneath her chin before rolling off to New Orleans. It's not hate, I said. What I feel about him is... I trailed off. She watched me. Sorrow for a spoiled life. But you can feel sorry for a good dog that goes rabid, too. It doesn't stop you from putting him down. She looked me in the eyes. I want you again, but this time it should be for love, you know? Not because we just saw two men beat the hell out of each other, and our guy won. Okay, I said, okay, that's good. And it was. Well, look here, said Frank Fratty's daughter when I walked into the pawn shop around noon on that Friday. It's the boxing swami with the New England accent. She offered me a glittery smile, then turned her head and shouted, Dad, it's your Tom Case man. Fratty came shuffling out. Hello there, Mr. Amberson, he said. Big as life and handsome as Satan on Saturday night. I bet you're feeling bright-eyed and bushy-tailed this fine day, aren't you? Sure, I said. Why wouldn't I? I had a lucky hit. I'm the one who took the hit. He pulled a brown envelope, a little bigger than standard business size, from the back pocket of his baggy gabardine slacks. $2,000. Feel free to count it. That's all right, I said. I trust you. He started to pass over the envelope, then pulled it back and tapped his chin with it. His blue eyes, faded but shrewd, sized me up. Any interest in rolling this over? Football season is coming up, as is the series. I don't know jack about football, and a Dodgers-Yankees series doesn't interest me much. Hand it over. He did so. Pleasure doing business with you, I said, and walked out. I could feel their eyes following me, and I had that by now very unpleasant sense of déjà vu. I couldn't pinpoint the cause. I got into my car hoping I would never have to return to that part of Fort Worth again, or to Greenville Avenue in Dallas, or place another bet with another bookie named Fratty. Those were my 3 wishes, and they all came true. My next stop was 214 West Neely Street. I'd phoned the landlord and told him August was my last month. He tried to talk me out of it, telling me good tenants such as myself were hard to find. That was probably true. The police hadn't come once on my account, and they visited the neighborhood a lot, especially on weekends. But I suspected it had more to do with too many apartments and not enough renters. Dallas was experiencing one of its periodic lows. I stopped at First Corn on the way and plumped up my checking account with Fratty's $2,000. That was fortunate. I realized later, much later, that if I'd had it on me when I got to Neely Street, I surely would have lost it. My plan was to dummy-check the 4 rooms for any possessions I might have left behind, paying particular attention to those mystic points of junk attraction beneath sofa cushions, under the bed, and at the backs of bureau drawers. And, of course, I'd take my police special. I would want it to deal with Lee. I now had every intention of killing him, and as soon after he returned to Dallas as I possibly could. In the meantime, I didn't want to leave a trace of George Amberson behind. As I closed in on Neely, that sense of being stuck in time's echo chamber was very strong. I kept thinking about the 2 Frattys. One with a wife named Marjorie, one with a daughter named Wanda. Marjorie: Is that a bet in regular talk? Wanda: Is that a bet when it's at home with its feet up? Marjorie: I'm J. Edgar Hoover, my son. Wanda, I'm Chief Curry of the Dallas Police. And so what? It was the chiming, that was all, the harmony, a side effect of time travel. Nevertheless, an alarm bell began to ring far back in my head, and as I turned onto Neely Street, it moved up to the forebrain. History repeats itself. The past harmonizes. And that was what this feeling was about. But not all it was about. As I turned into the driveway of the house where Lee had laid his half-assed plan to assassinate Edwin Walker, I really listened to that alarm bell, because now it was close. Now it was shrieking. Akiva Roth at the fight, but not alone. With him had been a party doll in Garbo sunglasses and a mink stole. August in Dallas was hardly mink weather, but the auditorium had been air-conditioned and, as they say in my time, sometimes you just gotta signify. Take away the dark glasses, take away the stole, what do you have? For a moment as I sat there in my car listening to the cooling engine tick and talk, I still had nothing. Then I realized that if you replaced the mink stole with a ship and shore blouse, you had Wanda Fratty. Chaz Fratty of Derry had set Bill Turcotte on me. That thought had even crossed my mind, but I dismissed it. Bad idea. Who had Frank Fratty of Fort Worth set on me? Well, he had to know Akiva Roth of Faith Financial. Roth was his daughter's boyfriend, after all. Suddenly I wanted my gun, and I wanted it right away. I got out of the Chevy and trotted up the porch steps, my keys in my hand. I was fumbling through them when a panel truck roared around the corner from Haynes Avenue and scrunched to a stop in front of 214 with the left side wheels up on the curb. I looked around, saw no one. The street was deserted. There's never a bystander you can scream to for help when you want one, let alone a cop. I jammed the right key into the lock and turned it, thinking I'd lock them out, whoever they were, and call the cops on the phone. I was inside and smelling the hot, stale air of the deserted apartment when I remembered that there was no phone. Big men were running across the lawn, 3 of them. One had a short length of pipe that looked to be wrapped in something. No, actually there were enough guys to play bridge. The 4th was Akiva Roth, and he wasn't running. He was strolling up the walk with his hands in his pockets and a placid smile on his face. I slammed the door. I twisted the thumb bolt. I had barely finished when it exploded open. I ran for the bedroom and got about halfway. 2 of Roth's goons dragged me into the kitchen. The 3rd was the one with the pipe. It was wrapped in strips of dark felt. I saw this when he laid it carefully on the table where I had eaten a good many meals. He put on yellow, rawhide gloves. Roth leaned in the doorway, still smiling placidly. "Eduardo Gutierrez has syphilis," he announced. "It's gone to his brain. He'll be dead in 18 months, but you know what? He don't care. He believes he's going to come back as an Arab emirate or some shit. How about that, huh?" Responding to non-sequiturs at cocktail parties, on public transportation, in ticket lines at the movie theater is dicey enough, but it's really hard to know what to say when you're being held by 2 men and about to receive a beating from a 3rd, so I said nothing. "The thing is, you got in his head. You won bets you weren't supposed to win. Sometimes you lost, but Eddie G got this crazy idea that when you lost, you were losing on purpose, you know? Then you hit big on the Derby, and he decided you were, I don't know, some kind of telepathic gizmo who could see the future. Did you know he burned down your house?" I said nothing. "Then," Roth said, when those little wormies really started to bite his brain, he started to think you were some kind of ghoul or devil. He put out the word all over the South, the West, the Midwest. Look for this guy Amberson, bring him down, kill him, the guy's unnatural. I could smell it on him, but I didn't pay attention. Now look at me, sick and dying. And it's this guy's fault. He's a ghoul or a devil or some shit. Crazy, you know, toys in the attic. I said nothing. Come on. I don't think my friend Georgie's listening. I think he's dozing off. Give him a wake-up call. The man in the yellow rawhide gloves swung a Tom Case uppercut, bringing it from hip level to the left side of my face. Pain exploded in my head, and for a few moments I saw everything on that side through a scarlet haze. Okay, you look a little more awake now, Roth said. Where was I? Oh, I know. How you turned into Eddie G's private boogeyman. Because of the Sif. We all knew that. If it hadn't been you, it would have been some barbershop dog, or a girl who jerked him off too hard at the drive-in when he was 16. Sometimes he can't remember his own address. He has to call someone to come get him. Sad, huh? It's those worms in his head. But everybody humors him because Eddie was always a good guy. He could tell a joke, man. You'd laugh until you cried. Nobody even thought you were real. Then Eddie G's boogeyman turns up in Dallas at my shop. And what happens? The boogeyman bets on the Pirates to beat the Yankees, which everyone knows ain't gonna happen. And in 7 games, which everyone knows the series ain't gonna go. It was just luck, I said. My voice sounded furry because the side of my mouth was swelling. An impulse bet. That's just stupid. And stupidity always got to be paid for. Carmo, kneecap this stupid son of a bitch. No, I said. No, please don't do that. Carmo smiled as if I'd said something cute, plucked the felt-wrapped pipe from the table, and swung it at my left knee. I heard something down there make a popping sound like a big knuckle. The pain was exquisite. I bit back a scream and sagged against the men who were holding me. They yanked me back up. Roth stood in the doorway, hands in pockets, smiling, his happy, placid smile. Okay, cool. That's gonna swell, by the way. You won't believe how big it's gonna get. But hey, you bought it, you paid for it, you own it. Meanwhile, the facts, ma'am, nothing but the facts. The goons holding me laughed. The facts are, nobody dressed like you was on the day you came into my store makes a bet like that. For a man dressed like you was, an impulse bet is $10, a double sawbuck at most. But the Pirates came through. That is also the facts. And I'm starting to think Eddie G might be right. Not that you're a devil or a ghoul or the SP gizmo, nothing like that, but how about maybe you know somebody who knows something? Like the fix is in, and the Pirates are supposed to win in 7. Nobody fixes baseball, Roth. Not since the Black Sox in 1919. You run a book, you must know that. He raised his eyebrows. You know my name. Hey, maybe you are an ESP guy. But I ain't got all day. He glanced at his watch as if to confirm this. It was big and clunky, probably a Rolex. I try to see where you live when you come in to collect, but you hold your thumb over your address. That's okay, a lot of guys do that. I decide I'm going to let it go. I should send some boys down the street to beat the shit out of you, maybe even kill you so that Eddie G's mind, what's left of it, can be at rest because some guy took shit odds and beat me out of 1,200? Fuck that. What Eddie G don't know won't hurt him. Besides, with you out of the way, he'd just start thinking about something else. Maybe that Henry Ford was the Antichrist or some shit. Carmo, he's not listening again, and that pisses me off. Carmo swung the pipe at my midsection. It struck me below the ribs with paralyzing force. There was pain, first jagged, then swallowed in a growing explosion of heat, like a fireball. "Hurts, don't it?" Carmo said. "Gets you right in the old Cazzini." "I think you ruptured something," I said. I heard a hoarse steam engine sound and realized that was me, panting. "I hope you fucking did," Roth said. "I let you go, you dumbbell. I fucking let you go. I forgot about you. Then you turn up at Frank's in Fort Worth to bet the goddamn Case Tiger fight. Exact same M.O., big bet on the underdog and all the odds you could get. This time, you predict the exact fucking round. So, here's what's gonna happen, my friend. You're gonna tell me how you knew. If you do that, I take some pictures of you like you are now, and Eddie G's satisfied. He knows he can't have you dead because Carlos told him no, and Carlos is the one guy he listens to even now. But if he sees you fucked up, but you ain't fucked up enough quite yet. Fuck him up some more, Carmo. Do the face." So Carmo hammered my face while the other two held me. He broke my nose, closed my left eye, knocked out a few teeth, and tore open my left cheek. I kept thinking I'll pass out, or they'll kill me. Either way, the pain will stop. But I didn't pass out, and at some point Carmo quit. He was breathing hard, and there were red splotches on his yellow rawhide gloves. Sunshine came in through the kitchen windows and made cheery oblongs on the faded linoleum. "That's better," Roth said. "Get the Polaroid out of the truck, Carmo. Hustle now, I want to finish up here." Before leaving, Carmo stripped off his gloves and put them on the table next to the lead pipe. Some of the felt strips had come loose. They were soaked with blood. My face was throbbing, but my abdomen was worse. There, the heat continued to spread. Something was very wrong down there. "One more time, Amberson. How'd you know the fix was in? Who told you?" "The truth." "It was just a guess." I tried to tell myself I sounded like a man with a bad cold, but I didn't. I sounded like a man who just had the shit beaten out of him. He picked up the pipe and tapped it against one pudgy hand. "Who told you, fuckface?" "Nobody. Gutierrez was right. I'm a devil, and devils can see the future." "You're running out of chances." "Wanda's too tall for you, Roth, and too skinny. When you're on top of her, you must look like a toad trying to fuck a log. Or maybe—" His placid face wrinkled into rage. It was a complete transformation, and it happened in less than a second. He swung the pipe at my head. I got my left arm up and heard it crack like a birch branch overloaded with ice. This time when I sagged, the goons let me drop to the floor. Fucking wise-ass. How I hate a fucking wise-ass. This seemed to come from a great distance or a great height or both. I was finally getting ready to pass out and ever so grateful to go. But I had enough vision left to see Carmo when he came back in with a Polaroid camera. It was big and bulky, the kind where the lens comes out on a kind of accordion. "Turn him over," Roth said. "Let's get his good side." As the goons did so, Carmo handed Roth the camera, and Roth handed Carmo the pipe. Then Roth raised the camera to his face and said, "Watch the birdie, you fucking spunk bucket. Here's one for Eddie G." Flash. "And one for my own personal collection, which I don't actually have, but which I may now start." Flash. "And here's one for you. To remember that when serious people ask you questions, you should answer." Flash. He yanked the third shot out of the camera and threw it in my direction. It landed in front of my left hand, which he then stepped on. Bones crunched. I whimpered and drew my hurt hand back to my chest. He had broken at least one finger, maybe as many as 3. "You want to remember to strip that in 60 seconds, or it'll get all overcooked. If you're awake, that is." "You want to ask him some more, now that he's tenderized?" Carmo asked. "You kidding? Look at him. He don't even know his own name anymore. Fuck him." He started to turn away, then turned back. "Hey, asshat, here's one to grow on." That was when he kicked me in the side of the head with what felt like a steel-toed shoe. Skyrockets exploded across my vision. Then the back of my head connected with the baseboard, and I was gone. I don't think I was out for long because the oblongs of sunlight on the linoleum didn't appear to have moved. My mouth tasted of wet copper. I spat half-congealed blood onto the floor, along with a fragment of tooth, and set about getting to my feet. I needed to hold on to one of the kitchen chairs with my one working hand, then onto the table, which nearly fell over on top of me. But on the whole, it was easier than I thought. My left leg felt numb, and my pants were tight halfway down where the knee was swelling, as promised. But I thought it could have been a lot worse. I looked out the window to make sure the panel truck was gone. Then began a slow, limping journey into the bedroom. My heart was taking big, soft, walloping beats in my chest. Each one throbbed in my broken nose and vibrated the swelling left side of my face where the cheekbone just about had to be broken. The back of my head throbbed too. My neck was stiff. Could have been worse, I reminded myself as I shuffled across the bedroom. You're on your feet, aren't you? Just get the damn gun, put it in the glove compartment, then drive yourself to the emergency room. You're basically all right, probably better than Dick Tiger is this morning. I was able to go on telling myself that until I stretched my hand up to the closet shelf. When I did that, something first pulled in my guts and then seemed to roll. The sullen heat centered on my left side flared like coals when you throw gasoline on them. I got my fingertips on the butt of the gun, turned it, hooked a thumb into the trigger guard, and pulled it off the shelf. It hit the floor and bounced into the bedroom. Probably not even loaded. I bent over to get it. My left knee shrieked and gave way. I fell to the floor, and the pain in my guts whooshed up again. I got the gun, though, and rolled the cylinder. It was loaded, after all. Every chamber. I put it in my pocket and tried to crawl back to the kitchen, but the knee was too painful, and the headache was worse, spreading out dark tentacles from its little cave above the nape of my neck. I made it to the bed on my belly, using a swimming motion. Once I was there, I managed to haul myself up again using my right arm and right leg. The left leg held me, but I was losing flexion in the knee. I had to get out of there, and right away. I must have looked like Chester, the limping deputy from Gunsmoke, as I made my way out of the bedroom, across the kitchen, and to the front door, which hung open with splinters around the lock. I even remember thinking, Mr. Dillon, there's trouble down at the Long Branch." I crossed the porch, seized the railing in my right fist, and crabbed down to the walk. There were only 4 steps, but my headache got worse each time I jolted down another one. I seemed to be losing my peripheral vision, which couldn't be good. I tried to turn my head to see my Chevrolet, but my neck didn't want to cooperate. I managed a shuffling whole-body pivot instead, and when I had the car in my sights, I realized driving would be an impossibility. Even opening the passenger side door and stowing the gun in the glove compartment would be an impossibility. bending would cause the pain and heat in my side to explode again. I fumbled the .38 out of my pocket and returned to the porch. I held the stair rail and underhanded the gun beneath the steps. It would have to do. I straightened up again and made my slow way down the walk to the street. Baby steps, I told myself. Little baby steps. 2 kids came sailing by on bikes. I tried to tell them I needed help, but the only thing to come out of my swollen mouth was a dry sound. They glanced at each other, then pedaled faster and swerved around me. I turned to the right. My swollen knee made going left seem like the world's worst idea, and began to stagger down the sidewalk. My vision continued to close in. Now I seemed to be peering out of a gun slit or from the mouth of a tunnel. For a moment, that made me think of the fallen smokestack at the Kitchener Ironworks back in Derry. Get to Haynes Avenue, I told myself. There'll be traffic on Haynes Avenue. You have to get at least that far. But was I going toward Haynes or away from it? I couldn't remember. The visible world was down to a single sharp circle about 6 inches in diameter. My head was splitting. There was a forest fire in my guts. When I fell, it seemed to be in slow motion, and the sidewalk felt as soft as a feather pillow. Before I could pass out, something prodded me, a hard metallic something. A rusty voice 8 or 10 miles above me said, You boy, what's wrong with you? I turned over. It took the last of my strength, but I managed. Towering above me was the elderly woman who'd called me a coward when I refused to step in between Lee and Marina on the day of the zipper. It might have been that day, because August heat or no August heat, she was once more wearing the pink flannel nightgown and the quilted jacket. Perhaps because I still had boxing on what remained of my mind, her upstanding hair today reminded me of Don King instead of Elsa Lanchester. She had poked me with one of the front legs of her walker. "Oh, my dear God," she said, "who has beaten you?" That was a long story, and I couldn't tell it. The dark was closing in, and I was glad because the pain in my head was killing me. Al got lung cancer, I thought. I got Akiva Roth. Either way, game over. Ozzy wins. Not if I could help it. Gathering all my strength, I spoke to the face far above me, the only bright thing left in the encroaching darkness. "Call 911. "What's that?" Of course she didn't know. 911 hadn't been invented yet. I held on long enough to cry one more time. "Ambulance." I think I might have repeated it, but I'm not sure. That was when the darkness swallowed me. I have wondered since if it was kids who stole my car or Roth's goons, and when it happened. At any rate, the thieves didn't trash it or crash it. Deke Simmons picked it up in the DPD impound lot a week later. It was in far better shape than I was. Time travel is full of ironies. Chapter 26. During the next 11 weeks, I once more lived 2 lives. There was the one I hardly knew about, the outside life, and the one I knew all too well. That was the one inside, where I often dreamed of the yellow card man. In the outside life, the Walker lady, Alberta Hutchinson, Sadie sought her out and brought her a bouquet of flowers, stood over me on the sidewalk and hollered until a neighbor came out, saw the situation, and called the ambulance that took me to Parkland. The doctor who treated me there was Malcolm Perry, who would later treat both John F. Kennedy and Lee Harvey Oswald as they lay dying. With me, he had better luck, although it was a close thing. I had sustained broken teeth, a broken nose, a broken cheekbone, a fractured left knee, a broken left arm, dislocated fingers, and abdominal injuries. I had also suffered a brain injury, which was what concerned Perry the most. I was told I woke up and howled when my belly was palpated, but I have no memory of it. I was catheterized and immediately began pissing what boxing announcers would have called the claret. My vitals were at first stable, then began sliding. I was typed, cross-matched, and given 4 units of whole blood, which, Sadie told me later, the residents of Jody made up 100 times over at a community blood drive in late September. She had to tell me several times, because I kept forgetting. I was prepped for abdominal surgery, but first, a neurology consult and a spinal tap. There's no such thing as CT scans or MRIs in the land of ago. I'm also told I had a conversation with 2 of the nurses prepping me for the tap. I told them that my wife had a drinking problem. One of them said that was too bad and asked me what her name was. I told them she was a fish called Wanda and laughed quite heartily. Then I passed out again. My spleen was trashed. They removed it. While I was still conked out and my spleen was going wherever no longer useful but not absolutely vital organs go, I was turned over to orthopedics. There, my broken arm was put in a splint and my broken leg in a plaster cast. Many people signed it over the following weeks. Sometimes I knew the names. Usually, I didn't. I was kept sedated with my head stabilized and my bed raised to exactly 30 degrees. The phenobarbital wasn't because I was conscious, although sometimes I muttered, Sadie said, but because they were afraid I might suddenly come around and damage myself further. Basically, Perry and the other docs, Ellerton also came in regularly to monitor my progress, were treating my battered chump like an unexploded bomb. To this day, I'm not entirely sure what hematocrit and hemoglobin are, but mine started to come back up, and that pleased everybody. I had another spinal tap 3 days later. This one showed signs of old blood, and when it comes to spinal taps, old is better than new. It indicated that I had sustained significant brain trauma, but they could forego drilling a burr hole in my skull, a risky procedure given all the battles my body was fighting on other fronts. But the past is obdurate and protects itself against change. 5 days after I was admitted, the flesh around the splenectomy incision began to turn red and warm. The following day, the incision reopened, and I spiked a fever. My condition, which had been downgraded from critical to serious after the second spinal tap, zipped back up to critical. According to my chart, I was sedated, as per Dr. Perry, and neurologically minimally responsive. On September 7th, I woke up briefly, or so I'm told. A woman, pretty despite her scarred face, and an old man with a cowboy hat in his lap were sitting by my bed. "Do you know your name?" the woman asked. "Puddentane," I said. "Ask me again and I'll tell you the same." Mr. George Puddentane Epping Amberson spent 7 weeks in Parkland before being moved to a rehab center, a little housing complex for sick people on the north side of Dallas. During those 7 weeks, I was on IV antibiotics for the infection that had set up shop where my spleen used to be. The splint on my broken arm was replaced with a long cast, which also filled up with names I didn't know. Shortly before moving to Eden Fallows, the rehab center, I graduated to a short cast on my arm. Around that same time, a physical therapist began to torture my knee back to something resembling mobility. I was told I screamed a lot, but I don't remember. Malcolm Perry and the rest of the Parkland staff saved my life. I have no doubt about that. They also gave me an unintended and unwelcome gift that lasted well into my time at Eden Fallows. This was a secondary infection caused by the antibiotics being pumped into my system to beat the primary one. I have hazy memories of vomiting and of spending what seemed like whole days with my ass on a bedpan. I remember thinking at one point, I have to go to the dairy drug and see Mr. Keene. I need kaopectate. But who was Mr. Keene? And where was dairy? They let me out of the hospital when I began to hold food down again, but I'd been at Eden Fallows almost 2 weeks before the diarrhea stopped. By then, it was nearing the end of October. Sadie, usually I remembered her name, sometimes it slipped my mind, brought me a paper jack-o'-lantern. This memory is very clear because I screamed when I saw it. They were the screams of someone who has forgotten something vitally important. "What?" she asked me. "What is it, honey? What's wrong? Is it Kennedy? Something about Kennedy?" "He's gonna kill them all with a hammer!" I shouted at her. "On Halloween night! I have to stop him!" "Who?" She took my waving hands, her face frightened. "Stop who?" But I couldn't remember. And I fell asleep. I slept a lot, and not just because of the slowly healing head injury. I was exhausted, little more than a ghost of my former self. On the day of the beating, I had weighed 185 pounds. By the time I was released from the hospital and installed in Eden Fallows, I weighed 138. That was the outside life of Jake Epping, a man who had been beaten badly, then nearly died in the hospital. My inside life was blackness, voices, and flashes of understanding that were like lightning. They blinded me with their brilliance and were gone again before I could get more than glimpses of the landscape by their light. I was mostly lost, but every now and then I found myself. Hellishly hot, and a woman was feeding me ice chips that tasted heavenly cool. This was the woman with the scar, who was sometimes Sadie. Found myself on the commode in the corner of the room with no idea how I'd gotten there, unloosing what felt like gallons of watery, burning shit, my side itching and throbbing, my knee bellowing. I remember wishing someone would kill me. Found myself trying to get out of bed because I had to do something terribly important. It seemed to me that the whole world was depending on me to do this thing. The man with the cowboy hat was there. He caught me and helped me back into bed before I fell on the floor. "Not yet, son," he said. "You're nowhere near strong enough." Found myself talking or trying to talk to a pair of uniformed policemen who had come to ask questions about the beating I'd taken. One of them had a name tag that said Tippett. I tried to tell him he was in danger. I tried to tell him to remember the 5th of November. It was the right month but the wrong day. I couldn't remember the actual date and began to thump at my stupid head in frustration. The cops looked at each other, puzzled. Not Tippett called for a nurse. The nurse came with a doctor. The doctor gave me a shot, and I floated away. Found myself listening to Sadie as she read to me, first Jude the Obscure, then Tess of the d'Urbervilles. I knew those stories, and listening to them again was comforting. At one point during Tess, I remembered something. I made Tessica Caltrop leave us alone. Sadie looked up. "Do you mean Jessica? Jessica Caltrop? You did? How? Do you remember?" But I didn't. It was gone. Found myself looking at Sadie as she stood at my little window, staring out at the rain and crying. But mostly, I was lost. The man with the cowboy hat was Deke, but once I thought he was my grandfather, and that scared me very badly because Grampy Epping was dead, and Epping! That was my name. Hold on to it, I told myself, but at first I couldn't. Several times an elderly woman with red lipstick came to see me. Sometimes I thought her name was Ms. Mimi. Sometimes I thought it was Ms. Ellie. Once I was quite sure she was Irene Ryan, who played Granny Clampett on the Beverly Hillbillies. I told her that I'd thrown my cell phone into a pond. Now it sleeps with the fishes. I sure wish I had that sucker back. A young couple came. Sadie said, "Look, it's Mike and Bobby Jill." I said, "Mike Coleslaw." The young man said, "That's close, Mr. A." He smiled. A tear ran down his cheek when he did. Later, when Sadie and Deke came to Eden Fallows, they would sit with me on the couch. Sadie would take my hand and ask, "What's his name, Jake?" "You never told me his name. How can we stop him if we don't know who he is or where he's going to be?" I said, "I'm going to flop him." I tried very hard. It made the back of my head hurt, but I tried even harder. "Stop him." "You couldn't stop a cinch bug without our help," Deke said. But Sadie was too dear and Deke was too old. She shouldn't have told him in the first place. Maybe that was all right, though, because he didn't really believe it. "The yellow card man will stop you if you get involved," I said. "I'm the only one he can't stop." "Who is the yellow card man?" Sadie asked, leaning forward and taking my hands. "I don't remember, but he can't stop me, because I don't belong here." Only he was stopping me, or something was. Dr. Perry said my amnesia was shallow and transient, and he was right, but only up to a point. If I tried too hard to remember the things that mattered most, my head ached fiercely. My limping walk became a stumble, and my vision blurred. Worst of all was the tendency to suddenly fall asleep. Sadie asked Dr. Perry if it was narcolepsy. He said probably not, but I thought he looked worried. "Does he wake when you call him or shake him?" "Always," Sadie said. "Is it more likely to happen when he's upset because he can't remember something?" Sadie agreed that it was. "Then I'm quite sure it will pass, the way his amnesia is passing." At last, little by slowly, my inside world began to merge with the outside one. I was Jacob Epping. I was a teacher, and I had somehow traveled back in time to stop the assassination of President Kennedy. I tried to reject the idea at first, but I knew too much about the intervening years, and those things weren't visions, they were memories. The Rolling Stones, the Clinton impeachment hearings, the World Trade Center in flames, Christie, my troubled and troublesome ex-wife. One night while Sadie and I were watching Combat, I remembered what I'd done to Frank Dunning. "Sadie, I killed a man before I came to Texas. It was in a graveyard. I had to. He was going to murder his whole family." She looked at me, eyes wide and mouth open. "Turn off the TV," I said. "The guy who plays Sergeant Saunders, I can't remember his name, is going to be decapitated by a helicopter blade. Please, Sadie, turn it off." She did, then knelt before me. "Who's going to kill Kennedy? Where's he going to be when he does it?" I tried my hardest, and I didn't fall asleep, but I couldn't remember. I had gone from Maine to Florida, I remembered that, in the Ford Sunliner, a great car. I had gone from Florida to New Orleans, and when I left New Orleans, I'd come to Texas. I remembered listening to Earth Angel on the radio as I crossed the state line, doing 70 miles per hour on Highway 20. I remembered a sign, "Texas welcomes you," and a billboard advertising Sonny's Barbecue, 27 miles. After that, a hole in the film. On the other side were emerging memories of teaching and living in Jody, brighter memories of swing dancing with Sadie and lying in bed with her at the Candlewood bungalows. Sadie told me I'd also lived in Fort Worth and Dallas, but she didn't know where. All she had were 2 phone numbers that no longer worked. I didn't know where either, although I thought one of the places might have been on Cadillac Street. She checked road maps and said there was no Cadillac Street in either city. I could remember a lot of things now, but not the assassin's name or where he was going to be when he made his try. And why not? Because the past was keeping it from me. The obdurate past. "The assassin has a child," I said. "I think her name is April. Jake, I'm going to ask you something. It might make you mad, but since a lot depends on this, the fate of the world, according to you, I need to." "Go ahead." I couldn't think of anything she might ask that would make me angry. "Are you lying to me?" "No," I said. It was true. I told Deke we needed to call the police. He showed me a piece in the morning news that said there have already been 200 death threats and tips about potential assassins. He says both the right-wingers from Dallas-Fort Worth and the left-wingers from San Antonio are trying to scare Kennedy out of Texas. He says the Dallas police are turning all the threats and tips over to the FBI, and they're doing nothing. He says the only person J. Edgar Hoover hates more than JFK is his brother, Bobby. I didn't much care who J. Edgar Hoover hated. "Do you believe me?" "Yes," she said and sighed. "Is Vic Morrow really going to die?" "That was his name, sure." "He is." "Making Combat?" "No, a movie." She burst into tears. "Don't you die, Jake, please. I only want you to get better." I had a lot of bad dreams. The locations varied. Sometimes it was an empty street that looked like Main Street in Lisbon Falls. Sometimes it was the graveyard where I'd shot Frank Dunning. Sometimes it was the kitchen of Andy Cullum, the cribbage ace, but usually it was Al Templeton's diner. We sat in a booth with the photos on his town wall of celebrity looking down at us. Al was sick, dying, but his eyes were full of bright intensity. "The yellow card man's the personification of the obdurate past," Al said. "You know that, don't you?" Yes, I knew that. "He thought you'd die from the beating, but you didn't. He thought you'd die of the infections, but you didn't. Now, he's walling off those memories, the vital ones, because he knows it's his last hope of stopping you." "How can he? He's dead." Al shook his head. "No, that's me." "Who is he? What is he? And how can he come back to life? He cut his own throat and the card turned black. I saw it." "Dunno, buddy. All I know is that he can't stop you if you refuse to stop. You have to get at those memories." "Help me then," I shouted, and grabbed the hard claw of his hand. "Tell me the guy's name. Is it Chapman? Manson? Both of those ring a bell, but neither one seems right. You got me into this, so help me." At that point of the dream, Al opens his mouth to do just that. But the yellow card man intervenes. If we're on Main Street, he comes out of the green front or the Kennebec fruit. If it's the cemetery, he rises from an open grave like a George Romero zombie. If in the diner, the door bursts open. The card he wears in the hatband of his fedora is so black it looks like a rectangular hole in the world. He's dead and decomposing. His ancient overcoat is splotched with mold. His eye sockets are writhing balls of worms. "He can't tell you nothing because it's double money day." the yellow card man, who is now the black card man, screams. I turn back to Al, only Al has become a skeleton with a cigarette clamped in its teeth, and I wake up, sweating. I reach for the memories, but the memories aren't there. Deke brought me the newspaper stories about the impending Kennedy visit, hoping they would jog something loose. They didn't. Once while I was lying on the couch, I was just coming out of one of my sudden sleeps. I heard the two of them arguing yet again about calling the police. Deke said an anonymous tip would be disregarded, and one that came with a name attached would get all of us in trouble. "I don't care," Sadie shouted. "I know you think he's nuts, but what if he's right? How are you going to feel if Kennedy goes back to Washington from Dallas in a box?" "If you bring the police in, they'll focus on Jake, sweetie. And according to you, he killed a man up in New England before he came here." Sadie, I wish you hadn't told him that." She stopped arguing, but she didn't give up. Sometimes she tried to surprise it out of me, the way you can supposedly surprise someone out of the hiccups. It didn't work. "What am I going to do with you?" she asked sadly. "I don't know. Try to come at it some other way. Try to sneak up on it." "I have. I think the guy was in the Army or the Marines." I rubbed at the back of my head where the ache was starting again. "But it might have been the Navy. Shit, Christy, I don't know." "Sadie, Jake, I'm Sadie. Isn't that what I said?" She shook her head and tried to smile. On the 12th, the Tuesday after Veterans Day, the Morning News ran a long editorial about the impending Kennedy visit and what it meant for the city. "Most residents seem ready to welcome the young and inexperienced president with open arms," the piece said. "Excitement is running high. Of course, it doesn't hurt that his pretty and charismatic wife will be along for the ride." "More dreams about the yellow card man last night?" Sadie asked when she came in. She'd spent the holiday in Jody, mostly to water her houseplants and to show the flag, as she put it. I shook my head. "Honey, you've been here a lot more than you've been in Jody. What's the status of your job?" "Miss Ellie put me on part-time. I'm getting by, and when I go with you, if we go, I guess I'll just have to see what happens." Her gaze shifted away from me, and she busied herself lighting a cigarette. Watching her take too long tamping it on the coffee table and then fiddling with her matches, I realized a dispiriting thing. Sadie was also having her doubts. I'd predicted a peaceful end to the missile crisis. I had known Dick Tiger was going down in the 5th, but she still had her doubts, and I didn't blame her. If our positions had been reversed, I would have been having mine. Then she brightened. "But I've got a heck of a good stand-in, and I bet you can guess who." I smiled. "Is it—" I couldn't get the name. I could see him, the weathered, sun-tanned face, the cowboy hat, the string tie, but that Tuesday morning I couldn't even get close. My head started to ache in the back where it had hit the baseboard. But what baseboard? In what house? It was so abysmally fucked up not to know. Kennedy's coming in 10 days, and I can't even remember that old guy's fucking name. Try, Jake. "I am," I said. "I am, Sadie." "Wait a sec. I've got an idea." She laid her smoldering cigarette in one of the ashtray grooves, got up, went out the front door, closed it behind her. Then she opened it and spoke in a voice that was comically gruff and deep, saying what the old guy said each time he came to visit. "How you doing today, son? Taking any nourishment?" "Deke!" I said. "Deke Simmons! He was married to Miss Mimi, but she died in Mexico. We had a memorial assembly for her." The headache was gone just like that. Sadie clapped her hands and ran to me. I got a long and lovely kiss. "See," she said when she drew back, "you can do this. It's still not too late. What's his name, Jake? What's the crazy bugger's name?" But I couldn't remember. On November 16th, the Times-Herald published the Kennedy motorcade route. It would start at Love Field and end at the Trade Mart, where he would speak to the Dallas Citizens Council and their invited guests. The nominal purpose of his speech was to salute the Graduate Research Center and congratulate Dallas on its economic progress over the last decade, but the Times-Herald was happy to inform those who didn't already know that the real reason was pure politics. Texas had gone for Kennedy in 1960, but 64 was looking shaky in spite of having a good old Johnson City boy on the ticket. Cynics still called the vice president Landslide Lyndon, a reference to his 1948 Senate bid, a decidedly hinky affair he won by 87 votes. That was ancient history, but the nickname's longevity said a lot about the mixed feelings Texans had about him. Kennedy's job, and Jackie's of course, was to help Landslide Lyndon and Texas Governor John Connally fire up the faithful. "Look at this," Sadie said, tracing a fingertip along the route. "Blocks and blocks of Main Street, then Houston Street. There are high buildings all along that part. Is the man going to be on Main Street? He just about has to be, don't you think?" I hardly listened because I'd seen something else. "Look, Sadie, the motorcade's going to go along Turtle Creek Boulevard." Her eyes blazed. "Is that where it's going to happen?" I shook my head doubtfully. Probably not, but I knew something about Turtle Creek Boulevard, and it had to do with the man I'd come to stop. As I considered this, something floated to the surface. He was going to hide the rifle and come back for it later. Hide it where? It doesn't matter because that part already happened. That part's the past. I put my hands over my face because the light in the room was suddenly too bright. "Stop thinking about it now," she said, and snatched the newspaper story away. "Relax, or you'll get one of your headaches and need one of those pills. They make you all sloppy." "Yes," I said, "I know." "You need coffee, strong coffee." She went into the kitchen to make it. When she came back, I was snoring. I slept for almost 3 hours and might have remained in the land of Nod even longer, but she shook me awake. "What's the last thing you remember about coming to Dallas?" "I don't remember it." "Where did you stay? A hotel? A motor court? A rented room?" For a moment I had a hazy memory of a courtyard and many windows, a doorman, maybe. Then it was gone. The headache was cranking up again. I don't know. All I remember is crossing the state line on Highway 20 and seeing a sign for barbecue, and that was miles from Dallas. I know, but we don't have to go that far because if you were on 20, you stayed on 20. She glanced at her watch. "It's too late today, but tomorrow we're going for a Sunday drive." It probably won't work, but I felt a flicker of hope just the same. She stayed the night, and the next morning we left Dallas on what residents called the Honey Bee Highway, headed east toward Louisiana. Sadie was at the wheel of my Chevy, which was fine once the jimmied ignition switch had been replaced. Deke had taken care of that. She drove as far as Terrell, then pulled off 20 and turned around in the potholed dirt parking lot of a side-of-the-road church. Blood of the Redeemer, according to the message board on the fading lawn. Below the name, there was a message in white stick-on letters. It was supposed to say, "Have you read the word of Almighty God today?" But some of the letters had fallen off, leaving Av you re the word of Almighty God Tod why? She looked at me with some trepidation. Can you drive back, honey? I was pretty sure I could. It was a straight shot, and the Chevy was an automatic. I wouldn't need to use my stiff left leg at all. The only thing was, Sadie? I asked her as I settled behind the wheel for the first time since August and ran the seat as far back as it would go. Yes. If I fall asleep, grab the wheel and turn off the key. She smiled nervously. Oh, believe me. I checked for traffic and pulled out. At first, I didn't dare go much above 45, but it was a Sunday noon, and we had the road pretty much to ourselves. I began to relax. Clear your mind, Jake. Don't try to remember anything. Just let it happen. I wish I had my sunliner, I said. Make believe it is your sunliner then, and just let it go where it wants to go. Okay, but no buts. It's a beautiful day. You're coming into a new place, and you don't have to worry about Kennedy being assassinated, because that's a long time from now, years. Yes, it was a nice day. And no, I didn't fall asleep, although I was plenty tired. I hadn't been out for this long since the beating. My mind kept returning to the little side-of-the-road church, very likely a black church. They probably swung the hymns in a way the white folks never would, and read the word of Almighty God with lots of hallelujah and praise Jesus. We were coming into Dallas now. I made lefts and rights, probably more rights because my left arm was still weak, and turning that way hurt, even with the power steering. Soon, I was lost in the side streets. I'm lost all right, I thought. I need someone to give me directions the way that kid did in New Orleans, to the Hotel Moonstone. Only it hadn't been the Moonstone, it had been the Monteleone. And the hotel where I'd stayed when I came to Dallas was... For a moment, I thought it was going to waft away, as even Sadie's name sometimes still did, but then I saw the doorman and all those glittering windows looking down on Commerce Street, and it clicked home. I had stayed at the Adolphus Hotel. Yes! Because it was close to... It wouldn't come. That part was still blocked off. Honey, all right? Yes, I said. Why? You kind of jumped. It's my leg cramping up a little. None of this looks familiar? No, I said, none of it. She sighed. Another idea bites the dust. I guess we better go back. Want me to drive? Maybe you better. I limped around to the passenger seat thinking, Adolphus Hotel. Write that down when you get back to Eden Fallow so you won't forget. When we were back in the little three-room efficiency with the ramps, the hospital bed, and the grab handles on either side of the toilet, Sadie told me I had to lie down for a little while and take one of your pills. I went into the bedroom, took off my shoes, a slow process, and lay down. I didn't take a pill, though. I wanted to keep my mind clear. I had to keep it clear from now on. Kennedy and Dallas were just 5 days apart. You stayed in the Adolphus Hotel because it was close to something. What? Well, it was close to the motorcade route that had been published in the paper, which narrowed things down to, no more than 2,000 buildings, not to mention all the statues, monuments, and walls a putative sniper could hide behind. How many alleys along the route? Dozens. How many overpasses with clear fire lines down to pass-by points on West Mockingbird Lane, Lemon Avenue, Turtle Creek Boulevard? The motorcade was going to travel all of those. How many more on Main Street and Houston Street? You need to remember either who he is or where he's going to shoot from. If I got one of those things, I'd get the other. I knew this. But what my mind kept returning to was that church on Route 20 where we'd turned around, Blood of the Redeemer on the Honeybee Highway. Many people saw Kennedy as a redeemer. Certainly Al Templeton had. My eyes widened and I stopped breathing. In the other room, the telephone rang, and I heard Sadie answer, keeping her voice pitched low because she thought I was asleep. The word of Almighty God. I remembered the day I'd seen Sadie's full name with part of it blocked out, so all I could read was Doris Dunn. This was a harmonic of that magnitude. I closed my eyes and visualized the church signboard. Then I visualized putting my hand over Mighty God. What I was left with was the word of Al. Al's notes. I had his notebook. But where was it? The bedroom door opened. Sadie looked in. "Jake, are you asleep?" "No," I said. "Just lying quiet." "Did you remember anything?" "No," I said. "Sorry." "There's still time." "Yes, new things are coming back to me every day." "Honey, that was Deke. There's a bug going around school, and he's caught a good case of it. He asked if I could come in tomorrow and Tuesday, maybe Wednesday too." "Go in," I said. "If you don't, he'll try to do it himself, and he's not a young guy anymore." In my mind, 4 words flashed on and off like bar neon. The word of Al. The word of Al. The word of Al. She sat down next to me on the bed. "Are you sure?" "I'll be fine. Plenty of company, too. Davin comes in tomorrow, remember?" Davin was Dallas area visiting nurses. Their main job in my case was to make sure I wasn't raving, which might indicate that my brain was bleeding after all. "Right, 9 o'clock. It's on the calendar, in case you forget. And Dr. Ellerton, coming for lunch, I remember." "Good, Jake, that's good." "He said he'd bring sandwiches and milkshakes. Wants to fatten me up." "You need fattening up. Plus, therapy on Wednesday, leg torture in the morning, arm torture in the afternoon." "I don't like leaving you so close to, you know." "If something occurs to me, I'll call you, Sadie." She took my hand and bent close enough so I could smell her perfume and the faint aroma of tobacco on her breath. "Do you promise?" "Yes, of course." "I'll be back on Wednesday night at the latest. If Deke can't come in on Thursday, the library will just have to stay closed." "I'll be fine." She kissed me lightly, started out of the room, then turned back. "I almost hope Deke's right, and this whole thing is a delusion. I can't bear the idea that we know and still might not be able to stop it, that we might just be sitting in the living room and watching on television when somebody—" "I'll remember," I said. "Will you, Jake?" "I have to." She nodded, but even with the shades drawn, I could read the doubt on her face. "We can still have supper before I go. You close your eyes and let that pill do its work. Get some sleep." I closed my eyes. Sure, I wouldn't sleep, and that was okay, because I needed to think about the word of Al. After a little while, I could smell something cooking. It smelled good. When I'd first come out of the hospital, still puking or shitting every 10 minutes, all smells had revolted me. Now, things were better. I began to drift. I could see Al sitting across from me in one of the diner booths, his paper cap tilted over his left eyebrow. Photos of small-town bigwigs looked down at us, but Harry Dunning was no longer on the wall. I had saved him. Perhaps the second time I'd saved him from Vietnam as well. There was no way to be sure. "Still holding you back, isn't he, buddy?" Al asked. "Yes, he still is. But you're close now." "Not close enough. I have no idea where I put that goddamn notebook of yours." "You put it someplace safe. Does that narrow it down any?" I started to say no, then thought, the word of Al is safe. Safe. Because I opened my eyes, and for the first time in what felt like weeks, a big smile creased my face. It was in a safe deposit box. The door opened. Are you hungry? I kept it warm. Huh? Jake, you've been asleep for over 2 hours. I sat up and swung my legs onto the floor. Then let's eat.